Eddie Van Halen here, telling you, keep playing, man. Gotta keep playing. It's the only thing there is. Music, man. Keep playing. All right? I'm gonna come looking for you if you don't.
Evening, everybody.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Guitarsenal, October 15th, 2024. I guess we'll address the elephant in the room. Ryan could not be with us tonight. He had some important things come up and wasn't able to join us, but we got a great show for you anyway. So, with that being said, let's get started.
You want to run the channel subscribers? Trev?
Yeah, which...
Or not? There we go.
Big shout out to all the channel members here that help support the show. We appreciate it. We thank every one of you. And if you're not a channel member and you want to be a channel member, just click the join button down there below the video in your browser. All right.
All right,
So,
everybody. This is the big show. We got a very, very, very special guest from very far away. It's Mr. Jason Tong from Headfirst Amplifications. How you doing, brother?
Hey, John, Randy, everyone. Thanks for having me.
What's up, bro? Glad to have you back.
It's literally the middle of the day here on Wednesday, so it's all good. Daytime.
It's getting to 6 p.m. here on the West Coast. Where is it? 8, 9 over there?
That's 9 over here with me on the East Coast, yeah.
Yeah, right. Awesome.
But anyways, awesome to have you here, man. I've followed you since I think the first time I saw you was on a Tone Talk episode, or Simon Hosford had sent me something of yours. You gotta check this guy out. And your geekery with amps and gear is an absolute perfect match for what we're doing here. And obviously, I have a vested interest in all of this now, so we figured it'd be awesome to have you on and talk about your flagship amplifier, what that's all about, and we can get to that.
Yeah.
But you want to maybe give everybody here a quick overview of who Jason Tong is and amplification and all
For
that
sure.
stuff.
Yeah, happy to. And just anyone jump in with any question at any time. Mm-hmm. I've only been doing this full time for a bit over a year, but I started actually getting into amplifier modding and building probably 10 years ago. And like I think probably a lot of guys that get into this game, whether it's building guitars or pedals or amps or whatever, you started off as a hobby that you do for yourself, and started getting some pretty early results that kind of blew me away. What blew me away was how with relatively few changes you could completely change the character of an amplifier, and that was very kind of it's very addictive, because you get in there and you make some changes and you go, oh shit, that's just transformed this thing, sometimes for the better, sometimes not, but you start to identify in your own mind the things that improve an amp for your ears anyway, for your own ears, and things that take it further away from where this tone that you're searching for. And I think we all have that, tone or a set of tones in our head that we like and that we want. And so that was kind of the beginning of the quest, really, was figuring that I guess I didn't need to go and just buy a whole lot of stuff off the shelf to try and find the amp that worked for me the best. I could kind of start to tweak and build things and start to kind of find the amp that worked for me.
So prior to all of this, Jason,
yeah,
what age were you when you heard whoever it is you heard that went, oh fuck?
Oh yeah, way back.
Way back, brother.
Yeah, I do. I have a very clear memory of that moment, actually. I was the youngest of three brothers, so my eldest was the eldest was 5 years older than me. And so I was born in 1970. So when I was 10, 11, it's 1980 and 1981, 82, as you're heading into that period of my life. And my eldest brother, he's, 16, 17, that age, and started bringing into the house all this vinyl. And it was all happening then, and just happening, and I'd actually started, through him, I'd really got an interest in music, I guess, and my other brother, so two older brothers, my older brother started learning as well. So myself and my middle brother, we started learning guitar. My oldest brother, who was the one that kind of brought music into the house, I guess, that, rock music anyway, he never actually learned an instrument, but always kind of encouraged us to get into it. My middle brother and I ended up playing in bands together and all that kind of stuff through high school and into our 20s and stuff like that. He's still playing, but he's in New Zealand, right, which is where I actually grew up. Been in Australia for about 20 years. But back to your question, all this kind of stuff was coming into the house, but the very first band that really made me go, oh shit, this is what I want to play, that instrument. It was AC/DC. Yeah.
What you can't go wrong with that. The kind of godfathers of most of it, aren't they?
Real early stuff, by then, so I vividly remember him bringing Back in Black into the house in 81. But we were already listening to the Bon Scott era stuff at that stage. And the first record I ever bought with my own money was an album. It was only an Australian release called TNT, which was in the US, and I think further abroad, that album got packaged up as High Voltage, mainly. So the first two albums that AC/DC released in Australia was High Voltage and TNT. And then for the international market, they kind of chose the best songs of those two albums and packaged it as High Voltage.
Right.
The offshore, the overseas version. So a lot of the stuff that's on that record is on that High Voltage album. And I remember sitting there with my brother, who I looked up to. Of course, he seemed like a grown up to me, and I was pointing to the speaker and going, "Is that Angus or Malcolm?" He said, "That's Malcolm." I was like, "Oh shit!" Because I was like, the rhythm playing, that the riffs that drove that music, that was the thing that I gravitated to very quickly. I mean, obviously lead playing, I wanted to do it. It got to the point where I wanted to learn all that shit as well, right? And then the whole, for me, the whole Eddie thing happened a little bit later, a couple of years after that.
Right.
Like it wasn't till 84, 1984 and 5150, and that's, that kind of, let's call it the mid-80s, that I really went through all the back catalogue and really got into the whole Eddie thing. That didn't happen, in 81, 82, around that time. I was still kind of like Iron Maiden and AC/DC and all that kind of stuff.
Right. But hearing that tone from Malcolm, I remember hearing that for the first time. I was like, oh my.
Yeah, and it's a thing that I go back and listen to that stuff quite regularly, and the things that always surprise probably all of us about that is actually how kind of pared back and clean their tone is. Both Angus and Malcolm back then. I think as things went on, and they tended to play with more gain, as their journey went on, which is probably true for a lot of our heroes, I would say.
Yep.
But just like, I think the thing that surprises me the most about that stuff when I go back and listen to it is just the simplicity of the guitar tone. And I was certainly guilty in my 20s of overcomplicating things massively, right, to my detriment, Yeah.
Well, we're a product of our generation, right? You're
right.
A couple of years older than me, but same kind of story for me. And then, kind of get caught up in Blitz.
Yeah, because
all of that
I got
stuff.
into the, like the whole Paul Gilbert, Nuno era kind of stuff, and I ended up with an ADA MP1 based rack rig in my 20s, and it was kind of fun and quite versatile.
Yep.
But if I had my time again, I would just have a 2203,
Funny
Marshall
story.
with an ST1.
Yeah.
And I reckon I'd be okay.
Yeah. I my dad was a player, so I started at like 9. He gifted me a shitty Princeton course. It was not a good one. It was terrible. My first amp, I went in. He took me into our Long McQuaid here, which is Guitar Center type thing. Mm-hmm. And picked out. I had the MP1, and
Yep.
I think it was Marshall Power Amp.
Nice.
And Marshall Cap. I brought it home, and I plugged it in, started playing with it. This sounds like fucking shit. Within a week, I took it back, and I got an 800.
Oh, nice. Well, man, I should have done that.
Yeah, it just didn't hit me. Through the years, gigging and stuff, other band members had those things.
It was just so hard to get gear, like where I grew up in, as I mentioned before, in New Zealand, right? And it's a small country. It was a lot smaller back then too, and quite isolated from a trade perspective. Back,
Right.
we're talking the early '80s and mid '80s here, and you couldn't just walk. It was at that time you couldn't just walk into a local store and buy an 800.
Right.
What had actually happened, and I think it was similar in Australia. I don't know this for a fact, but what had actually happened is that the lack of international product in the local market here gave rise to a number of amp companies that actually just kind of filled the void.
Right.
So there are these kind of, I guess you'd call them vintage. They're no longer around, but vintage companies that started building tube amps in the absence of, that it wasn't easy to just go in and buy a Fender or a Marshall or whatever. It kind of came right, like by the mid '80s, you could walk in and you into any store and you'd find Marshalls and PVs and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But in the late '70s, early '80s, it was very difficult to get that stuff. So it kind of meant that when you committed to your rig, it wasn't easy to swap it.
Swap it out. But back then, it did. At least I didn't know, and the players that I played with didn't know any different. You got that shit, and that was a necessity, like brakes on a car, and you got onto the business of making music.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until much later in life, obviously finances dictate a little bit of that attitude when you're a kid, but much later in life that I started getting into, the granular of tone and all that stuff. So did you play in the bands and do the typical rock guitar thing? And
Yeah, to the extent that I could. I mean, I went through university straight out of high school. Mm-hmm. I actually did a physics degree and studied.
I'm starting to come clear already.
Yeah, you can. I mentioned that because of
What's to
this.
come?
Yeah, I mean, if I'd had I wish I had the foresight back then to think, oh yeah, that's what I'll use with this stuff. Yeah. But I did study. I did a kind of what they call applied physics, not theoretical physics, applied. Right. So it was analog electronics, digital technology, right. Software. So coding.
Yep.
But when I graduated, at that stage I was in a fully originals band. And we tried to take it somewhere,
Yep.
We ended up playing in I mean, the kind of the furthest afield we got was we played in LA. But we were kind of confined. I mean, what we needed to probably do as a band, if we were dead set serious about it, was pack our bags and move overseas somewhere. Yeah. That at the time just seemed way too hard.
Of course.
So we didn't, but we did record and release our own album and put it out on CD, and had the good fortune actually of recording that album with Phil Rudd from AC/DC, who produced it and recorded it. So at that time, so we're talking now the early 90s, Phil had left AC/DC after Flick of the Switch.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And had ended up living in New Zealand, actually.
Right.
And he explained this to us when we got to know him. He explained kind of that story. And it was basically, he said, I wanted to find a place that was as far away from my old world as I possibly could.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a good description of New Zealand.
Yeah.
So he did a whole bunch of things when he learned how to fly helicopters and all kinds of crazy shit. He raced cars and stuff like that. One of the things he did was he built a 24-track recording studio, ground up. Like, it wasn't a conversion of an existing building. They actually, poured the concrete slab, did the ground insulate. Like, it was a purpose-built studio in his backyard. And he had he had a decent, you'd almost call it a farm. Not quite, but more like a hobby farm, I guess, lifestyle kind of farm.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of land, and he built the studio, and we competed in the Battle of the Bands at the time, and he was the judge.
Right.
And the first prize was a day recording with Phil, and we won it. He was. I remember playing the gig. I remember him being in the back of the room, and like, oh my god, that's fucking Phil Rudd. Here's a guy I grew up listening to. Guy grew up listening to AC/DC, right?
Yeah.
So that was pretty amazing. And then we ended up spending weeks and weeks with him because he engineered, produced, and mixed the album.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that was
that
cool.
Available
and
to be heard anywhere anymore?
it's on Bandcamp, actually. So our lead singer, who actually recently passed away, very sadly, but he's got the album up on Bandcamp. So
what was the name of the band?
The band was called Whisper Scream.
Whisper Scream.
Whisper Scream, all one word.
Yep.
You'll find it early 90s rock, quite a wide range. It was 4 guys in the band, all with different influences.
Right.
So
it wasn't a Midnight Oil album, is what you're saying.
It's quite varied, actually. Yeah. all over the
I love
over
those
the map.
guys, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
me too.
studio, was it a Pro Tools rig like early, or was it a 2-inch? All that stuff.
2-inch tape, 24-track analog,
awesome.
and 2-inch 2-track stereo for
Right.
mix. So he had 2 real machines.
Nice.
Not a lot of outboard gear because the studio was quite new at that point. He'd only kind of had it up and running for a little while. I can't remember what console was in there. For me, walking into that room, it was
overwhelming.
Well, it was just, I didn't know anything about that stuff, right? It was and this is all pre-internet, of course, so you just don't. I was just like, well, I know that's a desk and I know that's a tape machine.
Yeah.
And I know what rack gear is because I had a rack.
Yeah.
And he had Eventide H3000s and crap like that in there, and I was like, oh my god, it's the first time I've seen any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that we learned, and I learned from Phil, spending that time with him, was know your role in the band. He kept saying that to us, like all of us. Like, he goes, I know you can play that stuff, or you can play this, you can play that. It actually doesn't matter, he said. You've got to play that part for that song in your band, and your band has this persona, or it's in this genre, whatever it is. And he proved that point himself, because we all know Phil Rudd for like just 4 on the floor, metronome, but with a group. Like, he's got that, he's part of that AC/DC sound, right? Like the early stuff, like no other drummer. And one night after, late in the, we're at mixing by this stage, and we'd spent quite a lot of time with him by this point, so he was quite relaxed. We had a few beers and stuff. He actually got behind the kit.
Oh, really?
And played for us, yeah. What he called his granddaddy kit.
Right.
It was an old Sonar kit that he had. It's the the one kit that he had bought back, and it was in AC/DC flight cases and all that. Like, it was all
nice.
but he had it all set up in the live room.
Yeah.
So he got behind this kit and he played.
Yeah.
It was nothing like what I expected.
Good or disappointing or
amazingly good.
yes.
And he was like he played like a fusion drummer,
Right.
like jazz rock fusion.
Yeah.
Like I expected him, like, let's just punch out 4/4. No,
Yeah.
he was all over the map, and I was like, oh my god, this guy's. I mean, I shouldn't have been surprised. I guess he's a freaking amazing drummer, and he can do it. He can play all this shit, right? And he just like, and he was like, yeah, but that's not my role.
Pulled a Danny Carey on you. All he's ever done is 4/4.
My role is that,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was probably the biggest takeaway, and which kind of plays into the whole less is more thing. He was all about that because you can hear in their music, I think.
Totally.
Unless you're Yngwie, then more is more.
More is more. This is it. I mean, this is why I couldn't get my head around these lessons that he was trying to teach us, because this is the era of guitar excess,
Right.
Well, maybe early 90s. So we'd been through that, and we were obviously at the beginning of the grunge era. Things were changing for sure. But it's not what I'd been listening to. That's for sure.
No.
Right.
So at some point, I'm assuming the band took a back seat, and kids and wife and life got in the way.
Yeah, 100%. So, I guess the writing was on the wall thing. Everyone was getting tired. We'd done this album, and it took us somewhere, but not where we needed to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, there was a disagreement amongst a couple of the guys, which kind of blew up with some, a little bit of an episode. Nothing major, but it was enough to kind of like go, okay, that's it. So, yeah, I went straight into a covers band, actually, just to pay the bills at that point, and did that for a year, and then actually got a day job. So back to what I was saying about I left university, I did music maybe 3 or 4 years full-time.
Right.
Before kind of having to go, okay, now I've got to, grow up a little bit.
On with it.
Yeah. And I was lucky enough to get a job in a software company coding.
Cool.
So as a software developer.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I was basically had an IT career for 28 years until I quit 15 or so months ago to do this full time. I wasn't a coder the whole time. I did all kinds of stuff, right? And I ended up in a sales and marketing role for the last 6 or so years.
Which would have helped tremendously doing what you're doing now.
It has amazed me, actually, in a good way. The skills that I learnt in that world, a lot of them transferable, actually.
Yeah.
In surprising ways, just things like, all kinds of stuff, right? Dealing with suppliers, dealing with customers, thinking about product strategy, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, availability, all sorts of critical thinking things that a lot of people wouldn't even consider until they stumbled into it.
Yeah. Even navigating the complexities of it's a small business, right? But it's a small business with complex problems because I operate in 2 jurisdictions primarily, Australia and the US.
Yeah.
So I have 2 companies set up. It's a multi-currency business.
Pain in the ass.
Right.
got an Australian accountant and a US accountant. It's complex for a small business. It's kind of because it's not. It would be simpler if it was just in one jurisdiction, right? But I'm not complaining. These are all good challenges,
A lot of logistics people don't get.
Ahead.
I was gonna say there's a lot of logistics people don't see when it comes to doing a small business operation that deals with things globally. So
100%, Randy, and in all kinds of ways, right? I mean, there's the there's all the challenges around making sure you don't fall foul of the tax implications and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And establishing a business, establishing a company in a country that you don't live in as a non-resident is not super easy, and could only have happened with some help. And I guess I'll talk about Shea a bunch in this chat, no doubt, but here's the first opportunity to do it, so I'll mention him. So Shea is the owner and founder of Monomyth amplifiers, Monomyth amps. Shea's based in Indiana, and he and I met online, if you like, right? We actually met kind of through one of the underground amp forums.
Okay.
It's still around, this forum, actually. This is all stuff that's, everyone remembers forums, right? Before Facebook groups kind of took over a lot of that space. But the forums are still the best shit happens there,
What's Shea's company name again?
Monomyth.
Monomyth. Can you throw a link in the chat, Trev? People can check it out.
Yeah, his website's up, monomythamps.com.
Yeah.
And so we met kind of like we're aware of each other on this forum called Slo Clone forums, as in like Soldano clone, SLO clone forums.com. And it's an underground amp modders, builders forum, and everyone is on there. They might not post anymore, and maybe they don't go on there that often anymore, but all of the greats in this industry that we know or we can think of or name, they've all been on there. Mm-hmm. Dave,
yep.
John Sir,
yep.
Mark Cameron,
yep.
Kyle at KSR, George, the list goes on and on and on and on.
Yep. Yep.
So it's a goldmine of info. And it kind of the guys that run that forum, I actually had him on one of my live streams last year, Jed, and Joey is the other kind of main guy that is the admins of that thing. It kind of started as a way of sharing information about the SLO 100, which is where the name clone comes from. But what it's evolved into is more of a forum where people learn about how amps work.
Right.
And the couple of the moderators that run that thing, Joey in particular, has a level of knowledge about these things that is just amazing, and is incredibly generous with his knowledge. So Shea and I kind of learned a lot, I think, in our own learning curves in that space, and we were aware of each other. And then one of the things that I did that helped get this kind of business going, if I could kind of segue into that for a second, was I started learning how to do printed circuit board design. And this is kind of going back to the engineering, back to the stuff that I learnt at uni and hadn't really applied, because as I said, when it came to paying the bills, I was just doing software.
Yep.
I didn't really go back into what I'd learned about the hardware and circuit side until I got into this thing, but I had studied that stuff. Right. And one of the mentors that I had here in Melbourne, actually, who was one of the guys that had started and was running an amp company for many years, just in Australia, right? And kind of never really went international with it. But incredibly clever guy, and very generous and helpful. And we'd met through a friend, and he said to me one day, he said, "Jason, this is probably 5 years ago." He said, "Jason, you need to get into printed circuit board design," because I was talking to him about all the shit I wanted to do, and I was still doing turret board stuff and all that crazy stuff, right? Which is fine for simple amps, but when you want an amplifier that's going to be channel switching, then you start to use relays for that, right? Signal relays. Then you need to, you really kind of need to figure out your construction method and get into circuit board design. And I'm not here to kind of talk about whether PCBs are better than turret board and all the rest of it, right? They're just different things.
Yep.
And you apply
different applications and different,
exactly. You apply the construction method that makes sense for the product that you're trying to put together.
No, there's so many pig-headed guys out there that it's got to be turret and hand-wired and blah. It's, fuck.
I've tried all this stuff, right? Look, I mean, Dave's, anyone who watches Tone Talk, right? Dave, tease off about the stuff. I love it. It's awesome. Turrets are often noisier, right? So if you want an amp with a very low noise floor, which I'm very particular about. I fucking hate amps that when you turn it up, or they even at idle they have a hum. Drives me nuts.
Here's the turret board, hand built, took 4 months to do, and it hums.
Oh,
man, it is
bummer.
what it is, right?
Yeah. They are. I mean, they are. Like, it's kind of like, look, there's no. I think sometimes with vintage amps, people have an expectation that they should hum. That they shouldn't, actually. If they're laid out right, the grounding scheme is really important. So for anyone who doesn't know what I mean by that, is like your amplifier is grounded to the earth, like mains earth.
Yep.
And the chassis, so the metal chassis, which everything's built into. So like here.
Yep.
Here. It's got a faceplate.
Yep.
Sitting in front of it, so you can see all the controls and all the rest of it. But straight in behind that is a metal chassis that's actually connected to ground.
Right.
So like earth ground, like you could actually get a multimeter and tap it onto your chassis and put it into the ground pin of your 3-point plug. There's a connection there. Your circuit, your audio circuit inside these things has to be, at certain points, has to connect to the chassis.
Yeah. It's funny
Grounding.
you mentioned that, because when I started, I wouldn't say being dissatisfied with my amp, because my amp is fantastic. I love it. It's what it says on the tin, 100%. And for the reasons we've discussed, hands and all the rest of it, it's just not going to work particularly for me. So first of all, I allowed myself the grieving period. And then I started looking, and I told myself, because I've been such a Marshall guy for my whole life, that I'm going to open myself up to everything. And one that had caught me years ago back was the Mezza Barba.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of an Italian take on an SLO, I'm guessing by... So I was researching that, and then I saw your video.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, well, moving right along.
Yeah. Those, it's kind of a tricky one, right? I probably wouldn't do a video like that now. I mean, there's others that, I just wouldn't. It's just not. I just don't want to be that guy, and there's a lot of channels. There's a lot of channels that are doing that now. But at that point, I was nowhere on the map anywhere. So it was like, I'm just going to do shit and see
what
who
sticks.
pays. Correct, right? And it was actually through doing some of those videos that may be a little bit controversial, perhaps. That's how I actually ended up meeting Dave, and he's been amazing. Like Dave, I consider Dave a dear friend now, and we chat quite regularly. And none of that would have happened if he hadn't kind of seen one of my videos and gone, "Oh, hang on, man! Like, I need to talk to you about that kind of thing, right?" So
I think it was very refreshing to hear somebody like you, who's straight goods, knows the stuff, and just pointed out. You weren't slagging on it; you were praising the construction, the quality, and everything. But that's a major fuck up. But whatever, it's been done and sorted. But it was funny.
Yeah.
I think I was actually was talking to Randy about that particular video, and he's like, "You don't need to be bothering with this shit. You need to go see Jason at Headfirst and take a look at the Alta."
Yeah, thanks, dude.
It was literally, I think, an hour or two later. I'm like, "What the fuck is this, man? Where was this guy 6 months ago? Where was I? And oh my god!"
For like
So
a
it all
week,
ended for good.
for like a week, we're on WhatsApp. For like a week, John's just messaged me multiple of the Alta 100 videos.
Have you
I'm
seen this?
I've
Have you seen this one? Yeah.
Right. I'm like, yeah, I've watched pretty much all of these.
Well, I've had help from a bunch of people in terms of getting exposure with that amp, and none more than Simon, who's in the chat. Who's just been, again, one of these amazing guys that I've got to meet and call a friend through, this whole kind of amp thing, and to sit in his studio and watch him play, it was just
throw up. Yeah.
Nuts.
Oh man, I know he's listening, but it's like I've described this to a few people, and it's like when you watch like an athlete or anyone who's like amazingly good at something and they just make it look easy, and they just do it.
Right.
They do it in front of your eyes, and you go, "Oh my god, like that easy," it looks easy,
Yeah.
Which and it's not, because you try and do it yourself, you can't. It's
Yeah,
just like
maybe-
that.
Exactly.
Maybe if there's time later, we'll get him to jump on. I remember watching that 12 Tones video that you did with him. And first of all, you guys should see that one. The tone you got out of that, you were playing a Gretsch, I think it was.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. Right there, I'm like, okay, done. But he did 12 tones, so 12 completely different tones out of the amp that we're going to get to here at the Alta 100. He did a Michael Landau thing. Simple. Is all get out. And that was the one, to me, is like, oh, Simon, you're so good. I mean,
Right.
he just did all the Yngwie and the Nuno and all that stuff, but he just played this simple thing so beautifully. Is such a talent, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Dude, 100%. And most of that stuff, he just played. Yeah. I'll send you the check next week, man, and then we'll be friends again.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that he played that day was first take. I mean, like people say that but honestly, especially that one that it was the George Lynch.
Yeah.
Where he had the volume right up, and then he rolled back and
Yeah.
cleaned up and probably played the Mike Landau.
Yeah. That's
tune, I think.
yeah, and maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse or whatever, but
Yeah.
I knew that the top end, like the channel 3 and all that stuff, is fantastic, but the way that thing cleans up and backs off and is all the right stuff, none of that fizzy bullshit that you get at a lot of channel switchers, it's like, there it is, man. It's just beautiful.
It was it took a lot of R&D this amp, and it was obviously the first product and that we put out, and I'm just trying to think segue back to where we were before, and I was talking about Shea.
Yes, sorry.
And that's right. Yeah. So I started designing printed circuit boards, and again, these things were just for me, like, and so I could start to experiment with more complex things, and I had no idea that I had no idea that I would sell them, because that's actually what happened, right? I posted some of the results that I was getting from these very early designs, and they were kind of clone things, like I was playing around with some wizard circuits and some old Marshall stuff and whatever. And the guys on that forum, the Slo Clone forums, were like, "Are you selling those?" And I'm like, and when you go and get them fabricated, like they get fabricated in China, you get 5, minimum quantity is 5, right? So you 5, 10, 20 units or whatever, and obviously the more units you order, the cheaper they are per board.
Yeah.
But you can't just get one. You end up with a stack of these bloody things. And so I started selling them to other enthusiasts on that forum, and it was all just done via direct message on the forum or emails or whatever. And then I was like, and it just never stopped. They were like, "What are you doing next? You should do this board. You should do that board." So I ended up putting up an online store for that. And in the early days, those boards, I was using their Headfirst brand actually for all of that stuff.
Okay.
And I realized that at the time that I kind of got serious about, okay, I need to create my own product now, like my own amplifier,
Yep.
and that's going to be Headfirst. I needed the whole DIY thing, which has kind of been an important part of my journey, and supplying products to the DIY community. I had to rebrand that and push it off to the side.
Right.
And that's now called Evolve DIY.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So evolvediy.com. So that's still going, and it's a kind of, from a business perspective, it's not huge, but it's a good passive income.
Right.
Because the
And
design
that's for
work,
the true diehards, right? That are
yeah, that's for guys like, and there's a huge community out there. It's quite, again, it shouldn't be surprising. It always surprises me, but there's a lot of guys in Europe and the US and Canada and other parts of the world that build tube amps for fun.
right.
A hobby. Particularly as they get, the kids get older and they start to get free time again, right? People look for hobbies, and maybe they build a Fender Champ and they go,
Yep.
oh, wow, that worked. And then they do, a 2204 800 style thing or whatever, and they go, oh, wow, that worked. And then they want to build something more complex or high gain.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can go buy a kit from lots of places, Mojo Tone and all the places around, even Stereotone and things like that. There's not a huge amount of places you can go to get DIY supplies that'll help you build a high gainer,
Right.
or a high gain channel switching amp, that kind of stuff, right? So that's where that kind of where that landed. But that led to meeting Shea, because Shea started buying a couple of effects loop boards, actually, just loop boards, not the main.
Right.
Not the main
Yeah.
circuit boards, because he was doing his own thing already by then. And we just kind of kept in contact, and then eventually I got on a plane and went over there. And so Shea's become, he's become my business partner,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've become his business partner, and we're also really, become really good friends. Which has been
There's that one video out there of you guys do something Headfirst Atlanta style or
Indiana
style, where you guys
building
are making
Altas Indiana
burgers and
style
stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the footage, it just seems like you guys are having an absolute blast. You got some tunes going, and then you're getting excited. This baby's gonna be ready by the end of today, and then you start playing, and it's like, Jesus, fuck, man, you guys created something, or you did, yeah. And
yeah, well, it's a shared passion, shared interest, and those trips, I've done 2 of them now, and I'm about to do a 3rd, actually, in December. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But they're hard work,
Yeah.
but heaps of fun. I mean, it's hard work for me because I've got to, it's all the travel and all that shit that goes with it, and then you're in a different time zone and all the rest of it. But
go back
in terms
in
of
time.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But getting established in the US and building awareness and connections and all that kind of stuff, you gotta jump on a plane and go there.
Yep.
Can't do it all from here,
Yep.
Right.
But on a day-to-day basis, Shea is is my boots on the ground, and we have this amazing relationship where our skills are very complementary. They work together,
Right.
So there's things that. Sorry, that's my noisy. I know what that noise is. Actually, it's the jack on my guitar.
It's all good.
Way to sell amps there, pal.
It's not the
Total. We're all pros here, man.
That's right.
Got my dodgy freaking input jack.
That's awesome.
So we work together like all the time.
Right.
Like constantly. We'll be on calls a couple of times a week working on stuff. So I'm doing design work for him. He's doing distribution for me. We're working on. We've also created this joint venture. So we did a very limited run last year of 6 amps under a banner or a brand that we called Club Secret. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I'm going to be doing when I'm back there in December is I'm building a big run of these,
Right.
Evil Joe, and a run of these, one of which is going to you, John.
Yeah, fucking right.
Yeah, man.
There it is.
Fucking
Cat's
right
out of the bag.
And we're going to do a run of Club Secret, what we're calling Club Secret 24, which is this Club Secret thing is just a kind of a passion project thing that we do. Like, we've decided that we want to do a limited release once a year,
Right.
and it'll be a brand new circuit that it's not a reissue of what we did last year. It's a completely different amp.
Yep.
And it's, it'll be based on, it has our own kind of DNA in it, but it's based on things that we love from the past, if you like.
Yeah,
So,
I've seen a few videos on that, and it's like they're gone before you even,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So let's try and get our timelines linear here. We'll start with the Alta. If you got something previous to that, but I mean, this is kind of your flagship product. So what was the inspiration? What made you say, okay, fuck it, I'm going to build a better mousetrap here?
yeah, that's a good question. I had tinkered with a few things before that, but they were one-off builds. I started to take in the evolution of this whole thing. You get to the point where you get enough confidence to mod things. Right. And of course, you mod shit yourself. I mean, that's what I said right at the beginning. This is how it all started, right? But I'm modding my own amps, right? It's very different when someone sends you, a 1983 2203 JCM 800, their pride and joy, and now you're responsible for that amp,
right?
And you're going to do something to it. That you got to get to the kind of like, well, I wanted to get to a point of competence and confidence before I started doing that. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing a lot of that, and I started to do commissioned builds where people would say, mostly local guys, where people would say, "Oh man, can you fucking build me, this and this and this and this," and so yeah, I'll put that together, right? But they were not products; they were just one-off builds,
Yep.
So then I did decide, right? I've got to actually, I want to come out with my own thing, And the inspiration for it, so it was the Alta, this is the first product, is I just kept revisiting and started keeping a log, notes and all of my kind of ideas around this thing. What do I want in an amp?
Yep.
It needs to be able to do anything that I want it to do, and that was my kind of the yardstick for it all the time.
Right.
I wanted to be able to use it live, and that was kind of the motivation around the flexibility with respect to switching in this thing, channels and modes within channels.
Yep.
It's not that complex. I don't think it's not. There's more complex amps out there. Don't get me wrong, but I wanted to have an amp that I could get clean tones out of.
Yep.
Right. Mid-gain stuff and high gain, and then also some flexibility within that around being able to kind of control volume levels so that I can have a volume boost for solos or leads or whatever, right? So I'm thinking about using this amp live. It wasn't designed to sit in someone's bedroom. I mean, it can, and people do. And my one does when I'm not actually out gigging with it. It sits in this room, and you can just dial it in and just use one tone. No worries, right? You can use it like a single channel amp, no problem. But the motivation for the flexibility was around using it live in a range of different scenarios. Yep. And I decided real quick, hey, Pete, I'm glad you're here, man.
What's up, Pete?
Yeah, I decided pretty early on that I wanted MIDI switching in it, because I had one of the builds that I did for myself in my learning curve was I kind of developed this MIDI solution. I coded it,
right?
Using those old skills that I had, and I retrofitted it into this kind of 3-channel amp. The 3-channel amp, I've still got it. It sits on a shelf, kind of a BE100 style amp.
Right.
You know, we've gone through a number of different iterations that amp, but it was a big. It was an important amplifier in my learning curve, because building that thing and pissing around with it or whatever, it taught me all about channel switching and how to make all that work.
Right.
And then I added MIDI into it, and I realized that once I had that, where you can store presets and recall them with a foot switch, particularly if you're using your amp with a digital pedal, like Quad Cortex or a Helix HX Effects or an Eventide. I mean, there's so many of these devices now, right?
Exactly.
You know, and I realized that, oh wow, this is actually super flexible if I can pull that off. So, yeah, you know, you kind of like, it's one of those ones where you build it for yourself and then you hope like hell that other people like it.
Well, it seems like everybody who does this and does it to degrees of success have the passion for pleasing their own ears. You know, George Metropolis, Dave Friedman, all these boys, right? And it comes out, and the passion is, to me anyways, is genuine, right? It's not a big market brand, you know, where they're just pumping so many units per this or that. These are people like, you know, like me with skills that can put that sound in their head. And I think a lot of us have a quite similar sound in our head. It's just making it.
Yeah. It is interesting. I think that I do think about that a lot, right? I think a lot about what makes a guitar sound good. You know, and it's different for different people, of course, right? The perspective that people have on these things, it changes from person to person, and I think that I've kind of come to it's a high level conclusion, right? But I think that the people that are born in my era, John maybe the same.
Yep.
We mostly grew up listening to Marshalls.
Yep.
Right? And when I say, you know, I mean, I'm talking about you're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, whatever, you know. So it's late 70s, early 80s or whatever.
Yep.
Then you've got, and so that's that sound that's kind of been implanted into our bloody brains, you know. And it's certainly in mine. Then there's probably a generation of players that may be born in the 80s, whatever, right?
That's me.
Yeah, okay. Who were probably more listening to things that were based around an SLO or a dual rectifier or that era of tone.
I'll put it to you like this. My first tube amp was a triple rectifier solo.
There you go. Yep.
Fucking horrible.
It didn't last long. I had that maybe.
It's a different, you know, it's a different thing, you know, like they are.
Yeah, it's an SLO with a metal face plate on it.
At 150 watts and way more gain than you'll ever need.
Yeah, so it's interesting, you know, like because you think these are the things that I think about in terms of, you know, like product placement and where your stuff fits in the spectrum and all the rest of it. So you kind of understand. I do want to understand what makes people think that that's a good guitar sound, that's not.
Yep.
And it's different. Like I you know, I've seen this in the comments on my videos. You know, one person's "this is the best guitar sound I've ever heard" is another person's "this is the worst guitar sound I've ever heard."
It's crazy,
You know,
isn't it?
It's funny because I've told John and the rest of the guys, it's like, you know, I've played all these Marshalls and I just don't sound good through a Marshall. You know, if it's been a modded Marshall or you've got, you know, an 800 with a super overdrive or something like that in front of it, I can work with that. But probably out of all the Marshall amps I've actually played, I've done the best with the JVM, the 410 head.
Yep.
But I mean, that was Marshall's answer to their modern high gain style amp. You know, I mean, I went from a triple rectifier to a 5152.
Yeah.
You know,
I'll be right back, boys. I gotta use the bathroom.
But that was kind of a good segue to like Blue Mox here. He goes, what are the general tones from these if they relate to some of the classics?
Yeah. Well, I've got. Let's just. Is that coming through for you guys?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
loud and clear.
Cool. All right. So I've actually just got. I've got a real simple Tech 21 MIDI mongoose on the floor here, and if you look at these LEDs here, you see them move, right? I'm changing presets on my foot switch here. So it's a 3-channel amplifier. Channel 1 has its own EQ, and as you'd expect with channel 1, it's the clean channel. It's plexi-ish kind of thing, right? Channel 2 and channel 3 share the same EQ. So the channel 3 is the highest gain mode, and it builds on the core of channel 2, which is really the heart of the amp. Like when I went into the dialing this thing in and designing it, it was all based around getting kind of channel 2 to where I wanted it to be.
Channel 2 is the meat and potatoes.
The meat and potatoes, and then from there, I was like, well, we'll have a clean on this side of it, and then we'll have a high gain on this side of that. But I didn't want all 3 channels to sound like completely different amplifiers, right? They were kind of like, it's still in the same ballpark, you know what I mean? So in channel 2, it's got you've got these modes. So this is channel 2 in that that's the vintage mode. This is kind of like, it's a JCM 800 style level of gain when you think about it, because this is very Marshall inspired, this box, right? As I said, I think about the tones that are in my head. They're all that stuff that we listen to in the through that period. So the vintage modern thing is the way to think of that, is vintage being kind of unmodded sounds, I guess, and the modern mode is like modded. It's the way to think of it, as modded. And a lot of the mods that I developed in the run up to designing this, they kind of made their way into the thinking behind this. So there's stuff that I published on the channel. I've never kind of said this, right? But there's stuff I published on the channel with how-to guides. This is how you do this mod on a Marshall, blah, blah, blah. Kind of in there, to some degree. So this is kind of like, I use this sound a lot if I'm looking for a mid-gain rhythm kind of sound, and to me, it reminds me of back to that AC/DC stuff we were talking about before. Right. Then I can move that channel into modern, and you can hear the difference. I'll go back to the vintage. Gain bumps up.
Yep.
More bite in the tone, and the bottom end, it tightens up in the bottom.
Yep.
Awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
From there, we can mod it even further. So we're still in channel 2 here, and I'm moving into a mode here which brings in clipping. So this is like in a Friedman amp, you'll see it as a SAT switch. This is a different circuit, but it's similar principle. In other words, it adds compression. So clipping is like it's diode clipping, right? So you can kind of bring that in and out. So this is without it. When you bring in the...
Oh, yeah. I agree with the boss man. Oh, my God, that sounds good.
Yeah.
When you bring in the diodes like that, there's a feel thing that happens. It gets a bit more squashy under the fingers, you know. So when all that stuff's kind of turned off and you're back in the kind of vintage mode, it's pretty punchy. Like when you crank this amp up through a cab, it'll hit you, you know, and it's like, oh yeah, that's that kind of old Marshall, like bang, you know. But when you come into these modes, it gets more squishy, more saturated, and the feel under the fingers changes, right? So it becomes kind of quite more kind of silky, I guess is the way to think of it.
For the arthritic fingers.
Yeah, exactly. As we get older, our string gauge gets lighter, and we want more squishy amps. But I never wanted this stuff, like, I'm not a fan of amps that are become so saturated that they lose clarity. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot. There's gain in this amplifier. We haven't got channel 3 yet, and this is, if anyone knows, this is a Pete Thorne signature guitar. These are pretty low output pickups in this thing.
Yeah,
the PAF style whine, right? So I'm not hitting the front of this amp real hard at all. I'm straight in, plug straight in. I've got a guitar over here with a super distortion in it that we might have a crack at, and that you can hear. That's like, oh yeah, this is way more push on the front, you know.
this is the John spec right now. Move on to Randy after.
Yeah, right, cool. Because John, you're playing a Sir as well, right, at the moment?
I have two of them. Yeah, I got one of those in black, and a over there you can see is a what do they call it? Classic S.
Oh, nice. That's so cool. So I'll just show you quick, right? If I go to, actually, while we're here, I'll just flick over to channel 1 and you get an idea of kind of what this thing can do. So channel 1, as I said, plexi kind of style thing. I know you can't see it on the video, right, because it's blurred out given the depth of field in this, but anyone can go on the website and you can see how this stuff's all set up. The 12 tones video I've already talked about. This is demoed quite extensively, but each channel has a bright 1 and a bright 2 function.
They're stackable.
Yes, they can be switched in and out independently or both on together. And it's a way of, like, a lot of that kind of kerrang and that sizzle and bite that Marshalls are so famous for, and that we all love on those recordings that we love, is from that thing in the circuit, right? I know Pete Thorne's done videos on this, right? That little, he's done one on his SL68 where he showed that variation in tones, and then, as you know, John, you're just pointing to it, right? John Sir brought out the Mark II with this switchable bright cap.
Yeah, no bright cap, 100 picofarad, and then a 4800 picofarad. And
exactly.
The amp comes to life as soon as you put the big one on there.
Changes dramatically, right? Because it's letting, when you have a really large value cap like that, it lets a lot of signal through. Mm-hmm. The larger the value of the cap, the lower the cutoff frequency. So 100 picofarad bright cap only lets through real top end. You just get a little bit of sparkle on top. Mm-hmm. 1000 picofarad is a lot of top end. 4700, you're starting to push into the mid-range now. So you're getting all the tops and mids coming through. And if you know kind of how these things function, you can use them in conjunction with the gain pot to really tighten up the preamp. Mm-hmm. Because when you've got a big bright cap, which is the bright 2 on this amp is the larger value, both for channel 1, 2, and 3, you can have that on and then play with the gain pot, and you're really only tightening up the bottom end at that point because so much of the signal's already coming through. But if I dim it, you can see this in channel 1. I've got, that's bright 1 is on, so the top light is showing the channel, and then that bottom light is showing that bright 1 is on. So that's super responsive to my pickup selection here too. Now, if I just move this over, what I've brought in here is the Bright 2, and instantly so you're getting two very different sounds out of the same channel. Mm-hmm. And this is exactly how I actually use the amp and covers band that I play with here. So I have like channel 1 set. I'm not touching any knobs on the amp here, right? I'm just like switching between this mode, which gives me a kind of like a clean, and then I can go to get a crunch tone. Out of that same channel just by bringing those brights in and out.
And that's to me is super essential part of an amp, and that's something like for me to get this particular amp to sound great for the heavier stuff. It does not clean up enough. You know what I mean? And that's using the low output pickups and all that stuff. So it's the balance, and I'm too old to be fucking working that hard.
It is. You know? It is a balance. Like if I go over, I'm still on channel 2. I'm back to channel 2 here, which is where we were before I flicked over to 1.
Yeah.
So this is the highest gain you'll get out of channel 2. If I just roll back on the volume. It'll clean up.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome. That is so awesome, man.
It is.
Just with the MIDI thing can be, and I know John, we've chatted about this, right? Because you haven't used that a lot. It can be like a bit disorientating for people that have never used it before, but it is pretty dead simple. You just got to think of it as a way of storing and recalling presets.
Yeah, and you've got a video out that walks you through it. And in preparation for this, I've got an FM3 and the routing that you can do with it. So over the weekend here, I got the front effects from the FM3 going into there, and the post effects going through my wet, dry, wet. Got it all sorted out, and then the scenes and just mapping. That's just this channel. That's it. And you can do multi like you explained.
It's exactly how I set it up with a because I had an FM3. I've got my Axe 3 in the. I'm pointing here at it. It's in my rack on the desk here. Mm-hmm. And I had, whenever I plug in with that, I am actually going through the Axe today just for an IR loader. For anyone, I can't remember if I talked about it on the stream, but for anyone who wants to know. There was a question
actually asking which cab you had.
Okay, so I'm using. This is going into a reactive load, the Sir reactive load, and that's going into the XFX 3, where I'm just using it as an IR loader, basically, and I'm using a York Audio greenback, and it's a 57 57 and a 1-2-1 blend.
Right.
I've actually got 2 IRs loaded. It's not a pre-mix. It's actually just but I've got the blend in the thing. A little bit of reverb, tiny bit, just a bit of. You can hear it sort of, and then that's straight into the stream.
So at some point, I'm sure you must have like a balance era set of goop that you're going to throw on this thing?
Oh, yeah, actually, it's kind of like
Because Ryan's the absolute his dream tone, and I think most of ours is really. There you go.
There it is.
Yeah. The live without
a
a
bit
nat
shift.
tone,
I'm kind
you
of
know?
like no, I'm not interrupting on this one.
Just sold another unit, my friend.
I did drop D for that song, but yeah, you get the idea, right? Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I do have a pitch. That's actually
Awesome.
a block. That's dialed in on the XFX. That's
We all have it. There's
You know
nothing to be ashamed of.
plus and minus 9 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have the SDE 3000s too? You know,
Well, I
this on
do.
that side and that on the other.
I've
do the
actually
full
got
package?
two. It's just out of the camera shot here. I've actually got two original SDE 3000s over
Oh,
here that
yeah.
I used in wet dry wet. But I've got an SDE 3000 pedal that I'm using on my pedal board,
Right.
which is clearly awesome. But I do have this. See if this works.
Yeah.
That's a circular delay coming from an Eventide Eclipse rack unit.
Right.
It's sitting over here on my thing.
The Eclipse. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's the Lukather thing or whatever. I don't know.
2290. The style.
We should have it. Yeah, we can do purple. You can see if anyone has kind of noticed it, right? These are two different models. This is the Alta. This is the Evil Joe. The chassis design. This was a very deliberate decision. They're identical, so I can order. You know, when it comes to supply chain management, head shells and so on, they're actually interchangeable between the amps. I was going to show you, like, real quick how to kind of program this thing. It's not difficult.
Absolutely.
So you can see I've
Sure.
just moved back. I've just got a foot switch here it's got 5. It's the Tech 21 MIDI Mongoose. As you said, John, I did actually demo this on a video ages ago on my channel. If I wanted to change that setting, so I've just dialed up program number 4 here, and this is it's channel 2 in modern mode, and let me just move over to like a channel 3 tone, so I'll just set that. So I've just pushed the button there and it's gone to channel 3. Now I'm going to store that. And you can see the light flash showing that it's been stored. So if I move off that sound now, I'm on to number 3 there, which is our channel 2 in vintage mode. If I go back to 4, it's now recalling that channel 3 where it's set up. So this is where we're kind of getting probably more into the kind of gain that you get out of these 5150s and so on, right? Because they are,
Right.
they've got so much gain, those things, right?
Fuck me. Man, that sounds so good, brother.
Oh, awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Like,
So
where
if I
was
go-
that? I mean, ever since Live Without a Net, it's like, that's what I want. I used to bring in tape recordings to my music store and play it for the guys behind the counter. This is what I want.
Yeah, I get it, man.
Get a chorus pedal. Yeah, idiot.
This is why this is. I only use one preset, the Axe effects here, right? I just got literally got one preset set up,
Yeah.
and that's. I've got a phaser and a flanger that are dialed in exactly like Script 90 and a MXR flanger,
Yeah,
you know, and
You know-
that's.
You know what's
It's
hilarious?
just. It's not. I'm actually because I'm going straight into the amp. I can't actually bring those in. I can only bring post effects in on this thing at the moment.
yeah.
But yeah. So that's channel 3 in modern mode, and if I just set this in with the clipping, you kind of get into the territory now where it's kind of like super high gain, and that's where I should probably. Well, I want to talk about anyway. I'll talk about so Jim Root from Slipknot is using one of these.
Yeah, but I was about to ask about that.
And that's how he basically sets it. So.
It's funny you mentioned the Axe effects with the script logo and the flanger and compressor in front. When I built my my rig to go through this, I actually paused your video and copied your settings. I'm not going to
cool.
lie.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I added the second line to go to the wet dry with what you've got going right now, basically.
I've done that too. I've
Yep.
definitely freezed the odd Pete Thorne video.
Well, you've done the work, right? I'm not going to fuck around here. Just, yep, sounds good. That's what I like.
Definitely.
If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
Yeah, this is it. So that's like with the clipping on there, it's really squishy and kind of like quite forgiving under the fingers now, you know.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Got heaps of grease. Let me just give you guys an idea. I'm going to change guitars here just for 2 secs. So,
He's going to pull out his drop B guitar.
oh, I do have a drop B guitar sitting over there. Hang on.
Well, I'm hard now, so.
Oh, look at this.
Oh, yeah.
This is my 1979. So I've been hunting, like I'm sure you guys do as well.
That's
Been
that's pretty much the destroyer right there.
exactly.
Yep.
So I've been looking for one for years, and this came up on the local market. It's a 1979, straight out of that same factory, and it's a killer guitar. Like I had to get it set up. It was kind of like it hadn't really had much, you know. I don't think it had ever been worked on.
It's almost as old as we are, man.
Yeah. It's actually in D standard at the moment. But I'm just gonna.
Yeah, Pete, I watched Rez's video on that the other day.
Yeah, I watched it.
Great.
Just draw this. I'm just taking a little bit of bottom end out of the preamp there. You know, I was talking before about using the bright caps and bringing the gain back a bit, so you can kind of like, just a way of kind of getting a bit. You know, if you're really if you're hitting the amp a bit harder, this is a super distortion in this. Where's my finger there on this guitar? It's a way of kind of tightening it up somewhat. That's kind of how.
Oh, yeah.
Back to the Jim thing. I mean, no, he doesn't play D standard, right? They're in drop B.
Yep.
Right.
But this is in the kind of ballpark of where his tone is set up. Sorry, my headphone buddy thing here keeps touching the strings. Bloody annoying. So where were we?
Enjoying the awesome tones.
Exactly. See,
Creeping death.
You're in my realm right now with the way that sounds, with those tones. You're in,
Someone's saying, oh yeah, creeping death. We can- Is that Creeping Death? I can't remember.
that's trapped under ice.
Oh yeah, it is trapped under
Trapped
ice.
under ice,
right?
yeah. Love it.
That's awesome, dude. Brian's asking it what the difference is between that and the one Jim's using. His is 50, isn't it? 50 watt?
Yeah. So no, it's not. He has three, and two 100s, and then the custom 50, which he talked about on when he was on Tone Talk. So the 100s are in his live rigs, an A rig and the B rig, and then he wanted a scaled down version for their jam room. So a lot of the work I've done for him has been through Brad, his long-term guitar tech.
Yep.
Right.
Brad Clifford. Brad's just awesome, great dude, and I think he's been with Jim a long time. So you've definitely had a bunch of contact with Jim directly, but a lot of the work, when it comes down to actually doing the work and delivering the product and so on, it's all through Brad. So Brad explained to me that he has, and like the rest of the guys in the band, they actually have a separate rig that they take around on the road that they just set up in a jam room backstage. And full drum kit, 2 guitar amps, bass amp, the whole 9 yards, and they will get in there and warm up and play and jam. But the way that his actual rack and everything was set up, it could only handle a maximum of 22 inches head cab width. These are 26, right? Which is a Marshall small box size head shell. So it's kind of
how
standard.
much smaller from a regular, like a plexi size is that?
2 inches, inch and a half, something like that. Yeah.
So it's not
Just
like
a
I'm
little
going to
bit
have a
smaller.
lunchbox thing sitting on top.
No.
of
It's like if you have a 1987X 50 watt
It's like
Marshall.
50 watt. Yeah. Okay.
It's that size.
Right.
Yeah. So but in his jam room, 22 inches, right? So he had literally lunchbox style amps in there. Like he had a Victory something or other.
Yeah, the
Or whatever.
AVH.
Yeah, the little EVH one. I think exactly. And so the guy said, could you do an Alta for Jim's jam room, and I was kind of thought about it, and went, oh yeah, figured out how I could do it, and we did a 50 watt amp, and I had to basically design a custom chassis
Right.
for him for that amp, a whole different circuit board, because the Alta circuit boards wouldn't fit. So it's
I
quite a
was
lot of
wondering
work.
about that because you have a 50 watt power switch, which is a true 50 watt on the Alta 100. So it's just
Yes.
purely a space issue for.
It's a space issue, right? And I mean, we did actually, I talked before about the Club Secret thing, Endeavour brand, whatever, that I did with Shea last year, and we're going to, obviously, I said we're going to repeat it at the end of the year as well. But I actually, I designed it because I didn't want to do all that work for a one-off amp. I mean, I wanted to because it's Jim Root, and I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to do this, right? But like when he says you want something, I'm gonna try and fulfill his need. But I designed that architecture in such a way that we actually use the same boards for those 6 amps. Completely different circuit, but I kind of did it so it could do both. Right. Just by jumping a few pads and so on, all that, you could kind of make it so it was a bit more universal.
Scotty, you're just in time, buddy.
Yeah. We're
Hey,
just
Scotty.
getting into the good stuff. Not that it's been bad.
So it was
great.
that whole thing with Jim happened because of Mike Smith, whose Omega Amp Works. Okay, anyone knows Omega amps?
Yep.
The Granifier and the Obsidian are the two main heads that Mike and his team have. And Mike is the guitar tech for Mick Thompson, the other guitarist in Slipknot.
Right.
And Mick uses he uses the Obsidian, which is the kind of, I think Mike calls it a 2.5 channel amp, so it's a channel switcher, but I think it's got like a 2.5 channel because channel 2 you can put a boost in. It's got a built-in boost or something like that.
Right.
So it was March last year that Slipknot came to Australia with Knotfest, and I'd had some contact with Mike. We'd never met, but we had chatted a bunch, and it was just he was just one of those awesome connections that just had happened through shared interests, and he had been talking to me about potentially doing some circuit board work for him one day or whatever. We'd just been kind of keeping in contact. So anyway, he emailed me and he goes, the band's coming to Melbourne, like literally 2 days before they arrived. And he goes, they'd just been in Indonesia and they'd done a festival in Jakarta. He said, we're coming down, we should catch up. And I was like, hell yeah, that'd be awesome. The gig was on the Friday of that week, the festival, the full day festival. I think they had Megadeth, Parkway Drive, I don't know, a bunch of other bands on the bill, but Slipknot headlined. So obviously it's not Fest, it's their festival.
Yep.
And so we caught up on the Wednesday just for like lunch and a few beers and so on in the city. And Bob Strakel came as well. Bob's their long-term front-of-house sound engineer. Bob also does front-of-house sound for Avenged Sevenfold, and he's an amp tech, amp builder, hobby builder. Bob is. I didn't know this at the time, of course. So we met that day, just the three of us. But before I came into the city, like I was about to leave in about half an hour and to head in on the train, and Mike messages me and he's like, have you got one of your Alta heads there? And I was like, well, yeah, I do. Got my one. I had 3 here, but 2 of them were customer amps that I'd literally just boxed, they were still here, but I was about to ship them out. And so all that was left was my one, serial number 0. And I was like, well, I got my one. And he's like, bring it in. Jim wants to try it. I'm like, what? It's like, yeah, Jim wants to try it. And so I found out afterwards that Mike had actually made that introduction. So he'd said to Jim Root when they were traveling down to Melbourne that there was this guy down in Melbourne who'd just launched this new amplifier. He thought Jim would like it and that Jim should try it out. And Jim said to him, you know, who is it? What are they? And Mike said, don't worry, you never heard of them. Just if I get the head, do you want to try it out? And he's like, yeah, hell yeah. So I handed Mike my head on the Wednesday. Then, you know, nothing happened on Thursday. They were setting up at the showgrounds where the gig was. And then Friday, I started getting messages from Mike in the afternoon. I was actually heading out to the venue because Mike had got me on the guest list, and he actually got me backstage that day and stuff, which was awesome. Mike's just been amazing, actually. He's one of those guys that's just been so helpful in my journey. And so anyway, he's messaging me while I'm heading out there. So I'm just going to turn this off because it's bloody noisy, Jack. So he's messaging me as I'm heading out there. And he's like, Jim's trying your amp right now. He's in the jam room, and they set the Alta up in the jam room. I'm like, oh, fuck. My heart's starting to go on my phone, you know. Yeah. And I'm waiting, and then Mike comes back and he goes, he says it's the best amp he's ever played. I was like, fuck off. He's like, I said, you're kidding me. He said, oh, I'm fucking serious. And then he goes, Mike says to me, because he's obviously standing in the room. I've got this mental image in my brain of Jim sitting there playing my amp and Mike standing next to him. Yeah. And Mike goes, he wants to know how much. And I was like, what, for that head? my one. Yeah. I said he can have it for free. If he's you know, thinks he might like to promote it, like if he can do some, you know, promotional stuff or whatever, like post about it or some shit like that. Yeah. That's the, you know, best marketing dollars you'll ever spend in your life. Mm-hmm. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm waiting for the reply, obviously anxiously. Mike finally comes back and he goes, yeah. He's all cool to do promo for the amp, but he wants to pay for it. He wants to buy it. Yeah. So it kind of says something about the guy, I think, you know.
100%.
So again, the question was how much, and so I had to try and answer the impossible question. It's basically half price, right? Is how I ended up doing it. And so he grabbed that.
Your personal amp?
Yeah, he's cool got it.
Yeah.
So I had to build another one.
Yeah.
For me. I ended up with serial number 13 or something, and then that's gone as well because I wanted one of these Rev 2 heads, which is I should talk at some point about KSR, and I'm sure time permitting we will. But they had three Australian dates that tour, so Melbourne, Sydney, then Brisbane. Yeah. And when they were in Sydney, I talked Brad through how to wire the amp for 120 because it was the 240 volt amp. Mm-hmm. And to get it into his rack, it has to be one. So no matter where they are in the world, they've got voltage conditioners and all that shit in their racks so that everything runs at 120.
Right.
So he did that in Sydney, and then in Brisbane, the third Australian show, he used the amp the whole night. Obviously, I wasn't there. I was only there for the Melbourne show where he didn't use the amp, you know. Yeah. And that's when he started messaging me actually. So I'd kind of just on Instagram, direct messaging, you know, back and forward. But he started messaging me, and he's like, "Man, this is freaking amazing. Love it." He just said it so. He said it so articulate. That was the kind of the main feedback I can remember. That in that. If anyone's listened to Slipknot and knows anything about the band, you know there's eight guys, or 9, a lot on stage, all making noise. You know, there's a lot to kind of like you've got to carve out your own little piece.
Sonic space, yeah.
Exactly, right? And so he wants something that's got a lot of clarity, but he also plays with a ton of gain. And so, getting those two things together is obviously something that he's kind of, searching for. And that's, that's, as I said right at the beginning of this, right, all the work that went into this amp was just trying to build something that I liked. And then you hope that others do as well. So he's So he's then bought another one so that he could have it in his B rig. So they have two complete rigs that they were using in different parts of the world. And then we did the 50 watt one. And now he talked about this on Tone Talk, if anyone watched that show that he was on. They've also built for themselves, well, their techs have built for them fly rig style setups as well for when they go and do, a short run. Mm-hmm. Right, they're going, like, for example, just this weekend, they're going down to South America to do 3 or 4 dates, just in and then out.
Right.
And with the cost of freight and all that stuff, right, so that he's having to kind of, they've gone to kind of fly rig style setups for that thing. And so they asked me this about maybe 6 months ago. I think was the first time it was approached with me. So Bob, who's their front of house sound engineer, he actually approached me and called me one day and he said, look, this is, we're setting up these kind of fly rigs for the guys for these one-off dates and so on. Could you do a tube preamp for Jim? A rack mount tube preamp, which is what the pros want, right? Mm-hmm. So I did, and now he's got. It's just there was only been one made ever, but that's now in his fly rig, and they're going to use it for the first time this weekend for these South American tour dates. So I'm really interested to see how that goes because Brad's been testing it and using it for the last couple of weeks. Jim hasn't played a gig with it yet though. It's going to happen this weekend. So if we'll see how that goes, right? Because I would like to bring that out as a product eventually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it puts me kind of like I've asked a bunch of people about this actually, because when you think about preamps, there's definitely a market for this stuff now. Mm-hmm. Analog preamp, digital back end. For the portable stuff, like it's like that Dave's IRX thing, you know what I mean? Like, and this is not a pedal; it's a rack mount unit, but it takes you down that pathway to a degree, like and kind of like starting to go, looking at things that are outside just heads, and I'll still always do these. And they will always sell. People still want this stuff, right? Which is amazing and awesome. And I'm super, super grateful about that. But people also want, lightweight shit that they can jump on a plane with and do a gig and, and they don't necessarily just want to use the digital modeler for the whole thing.
Yep. People have the energy to actually jump on planes and go play and jump on a plane again and go and play. And
yeah, exactly.
That I have a lot of questions about, but it just I want to kind of get clear on the Alta and what it is, because we haven't really we've talked around it, but we haven't really said this is a 100-watt EL34 amp. It's a 3-channel clean plexi channel.
Yep.
The main core channel of 2, and then 3, which is redonkulously everything else you would ever want in a higher gain amp.
Channel 3, that's a great summary, John. Each channel has a vintage and a modern mode. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's not, because it's all MIDI controllable, that's not a set and forget thing. So you could have a preset, which is channel 2 vintage, another preset, channel 2 modern, and you'll get, we demoed that earlier, right? You'll get 2 different sounds out of that, and you haven't touched any knobs. It's just kind of like, this is I wanted to I worked really hard on the voicing of those different options so that when you activated them or turned them on, you weren't reaching for the EQ on the amp. Because it started when obviously in the first prototype, that's exactly what was happening, right? I'd go from one mode to the other, and then I'm like, I've got to re-EQ this to get it right. And so slowly but surely, I kind of brought those things in so that you could go across these different modes. And then you've got each channel also has we talked about that, Bright 1, Bright 2, So do two different bright options. As I said, you can think about that like the bright caps that you'll see in the old Marshalls, where the most common mod I've ever seen, because I've looked at a lot of vintage Marshalls now, all around Australia have been sent to me to work on, and the most common thing that I've seen done to an old Marshall is been the bright cap's been taken out of it.
Okay.
Yeah, or changed to a smaller value, because those old amps, you need to run them like, what a Plexi is like. If you get your SL68 and you put the master on the rear on 10.
Yeah, I've done that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Put your bright cap into the 4700 picofarad mode, which is the old way, right?
Yeah.
Plug into the treble channel.
Done that.
And then just crack that treble on, like the channel volume, and it'll be loud as hell real quick.
Yep.
But it'll be really bright and with hardly any bottom end until you bring that channel volume right up to, say, 6.
I don't know if I made it that far, Jason, but
it's so loud.
Well, here's what I got it to wherever it was. I think it was 6 or something like that. And I actually had to go out of the room. It was, I've played 100-watt Marshalls and 5150s and all that. I've cranked them. Soul-alteringly loud. That's how fucking loud this thing is.
They're insane. And that's why, when I was kind of thinking about the voicing options in this amp and having those able to be switched, and then also able to be their state able to be stored via the MIDI capability.
Yes.
I was thinking about all that stuff. Like this is the most common thing that gets changed in these amps is this bright cap, right? And you can see it in John's Mark II SL68. I mean, he knew this before I did, but he eventually put it into his product line where it's like, oh, put that on a switch, because some people want to run it like that with that big bright cap, and that's that sound, man. It's freaking killer, but it's just the one thing, right? And then if you want to get a cleaner tone, or a Plexi has a lot of gain, right? People think Plexis are clean amps. Well, not when you turn them up, they're not.
Nope.
They got way, got shitloads of gain.
Yep.
So I'm kind of rambling now, but the each channel, back to the description of the amp, that's a question you asked, John. You got the vintage modern, and then you got the brights there. Right. When you go to channel 2, it's people ask me, what's the inspiration for that channel? And it is a late 70s, it's not the same, but it's inherited from a late 70s master volume Marshall 2203.
Late GMPs, early 800.
Yeah, 100%. It's not the same, but if anyone kind of started pulling shit out of the amp and looked at what's the core architecture of this thing, that's it, because it's the way that the gain staging is set up. So when you think about these amplifiers that have the level of gain that's in channel 2 of this, which is like the BE style channel, the SLO stuff, the list goes on and on and on. Your cascading gain stages, I think I might have talked a little bit about this the last time I was on the channel, but you develop overdrive and distortion in the amplifier by cascading the output of one gain stage into the next, and then into the next. So you have 3 gain stages, 4 gain stages, etc. And when you're putting this stuff together, you always have a gain pot as well, right? These amplifiers have a gain pot, and we first saw that in the master volume Marshalls, the 2203, 2204, as you said, John, the late 70s, early 80s into the 800s. You have a preamp gain and a master volume now, rather than just a single volume. Yep. And when I talk about the architecture of the circuit, what I kind of mean by that is, well, where is that gain pot in relative to the gain stages? Is it after the first gain stage or after the second gain stage? And those design decisions actually have a huge impact on what the amp will sound like and how it will respond when you muck around with that gain. So the architecture of channel 2 here is like a 2203 in that regard, in terms of where the gain pod is in the gain stage setup it comes from there.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's selling yourself short to, you've done so much to customize this and make it your own, and you've got global response, presence, and what do you call the resonance? Do you call it a resonance, or I can't remember?
Depth.
A depth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's got we didn't even talk about the power amp controls, but right towards this end of the amp, and it's the same on the Evil Joe actually, there's a depth, a response, and a presence. The depth is, most people know what presence is as an amp. It's the very high end.
Mm-hmm.
The presence is actually hooked up to the power amp part of the amp, whereas your treble, middle, and bass knobs are part of the preamp.
Right.
And when you look at an old Marshall, it just goes, treble, middle, bass, presence. They all look like they're all, they work on the different, center frequencies, right? The bass, middle, treble, and the presence is the high end. But the presence is actually part of the power amp. You're tuning the response of the power amp.
Yeah.
And so you can actually change the response of the power amp with the presence. Then you have the depth, which is like the low end, but generated in the power amp.
Yep.
And the response is the overall negative feedback. And what negative feedback does is change the character and the feel of the amp quite a lot, where it'll go from brighter and more in your face and kind of more wild, which is less negative feedback, through to right the other way. It'll be darker, tighter, and kind of the power amp's kind of working much more in a tighter way. So it's I often find that more modern players who want that real kind of chug and really tight response will run with a lot of negative feedback.
Right.
And players looking for the more kind of wild, the plexi ed tone kind of thing, you run with the negative feedback up. So it's a lot less negative feedback. So on the response pot, that's kind of turning it up.
Right.
It becomes brighter and more wild and more like an old plexi.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing thing I found is it must have, and I think you mentioned this already, but with your voicing options that are switched through MIDI, to have it, I've seen I think almost every goddamn clip about this amp, and the ironic thing out of it is the only thing that really changes on the tone stacks usually is it's between 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock, somewhere in there. Most of the amp, it's the joke is that you turn an amp on 5, all on 5, and see what it sounds like. This is totally true with this. And you just hit the bright 1 or the bright 2 or both of them or the modern vintage, and it's a different beast. And you haven't done fuck all except put in the voicings.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, that was definitely a deliberate thing.
Yeah.
I wanted it to sound decent with everything at midday, and in that kind of, it took a year. I spent literally 12 months working on the design before it was put out there as something that people could buy. And there was a extended period where I worked on getting, as I said before, right, where if you move between channels or move between, say, vintage to modern, or whatever, you weren't compelled to just reach for the EQ. I wanted to just be able to flick between them and go, well, I've got my settings now. That's it, you know. And you might dial it in for a guitar or a particular cab that you've got it running with. But once you've got the pot set, flick between the options without having to re-EQ it was the goal.
And then you can put it all onto MIDI things to 128 different combinations if you can fucking figure that out.
Look, you can. I use. I was using 4. I'm now using 5. I'm now guilty of using 5, but and it just is covers band, right? We're a range of stuff. We've got a female lead singer.
Yep.
It's not a metal band. It's it's more kind of, I wouldn't say middle of the road, but it's pub rock covers.
Yeah. You want a pop band, you or popular music because you fucking need to get paid.
Exactly. I mean, it's cool. It's been awesome that, I mean, I've only ever until this latest experience, I've only ever played with male lead singers. So it boxes you into a certain repertoire. So this is I've had to learn a whole new set of songs, which has been awesome. And I'll be trying to get tones. I don't seek to replicate guitar tones on records. I know some people do, right? Especially guys who use modelers. I think that's a no-win situation, right? I want 4 decent tones out of the amp that cover clean to, heavily distorted lead stuff. So as I've probably already shown, I set it up with 4 tones.
Yep.
Two clean sounds, like a super clean, and then that crunchy clean, just with the bright options. A dirty rhythm sound, which is channel 2, and then a lead sound for channel 3, and that's dialed up louder.
Yep. So
that I get a volume boost. I've actually extended it to 5, guilty pleasure, because I wanted a vintage and a modern for channel 2, and I've actually found that super useful. Because you can get that.
It's such a sweet spot for, guys of our generation, I would say, you not just pigeonholing it, but for me, it's like I love the convenience of something like a fractal, and they're great at what they do, but it's not a fucking tube amp. It'll never be, and it doesn't purport to be, and all the rest of it. But to have something and we're in a unique situation with what we play. We play everything from Pink Floyd all the way up to drop C heavy stuff.
Yep.
And to have that flexibility and the core tone is there. It's just, to dialing your version of goodness.
It's a really interesting journey, actually, with this band. I've been playing with them for maybe 6 months or so, and it's an old friend of mine who's a drummer. All right, he's been playing with them for a while, and please send John's amp to me first. Yeah, man.
John's over there going, "Fuck off."
Send me your address, Ryan, and we'll fucking tee it up. When I first started playing with these guys, John, they're an in-ears band, and it was silent stages, right? And I was like, "Oh fuck, what am I going to do here?" And
give me wedges or give me death.
Oh man, I was like, "Fuck, this is a head fuck," because I've never done that. I was just like old school, off the back line, turn it up loud,
Yeah.
And it forced me to kind of rethink a whole bunch of things. So I have a Quad Cortex. I've had it since it came out, and I actually was using the Quad Cortex as almost like a notebook for capturing amps that I'd modded.
Right.
Before I send them back to the customer, I'll take some profiles of it or captures of it, and so I've kind of got that sound like, oh, well, that was how that mod sounded. I know it's just a digital copy, right? But it's quite useful, you can kind of go back and go, oh yeah, that's right, that's what that mod sounded like. And in terms of kind of if you're playing an amplifier through a reactive load and an IR through studio monitors, which I can do here, the digital capture and the actual amp through the IR been pretty similar.
Yep.
Not the same thing through a cab, of course, but so anyway, so I had this Quad Cortex, and so approaching this newfound environment, I captured a whole bunch of settings into my Quad Cortex of this amp. So those 4 or 5 key sounds, and I had them as captures, and I was using amp blocks. But then I started doing that with in-ears and the rest, and I thought, this is fucking horrible. I just hated it as a player.
Yep.
Oh man.
Yeah. It
It's
may
just
sound good out front, but
May sound
I'm not
good out
here
front.
for you. I'm here for me.
totally.
Ghost.
Fuck them. I'm like, this sucks, man.
Yeah.
And so we had a bit of a conversation, and
Come to Jesus moment.
a little bit. I'm like, I'm fucking bringing an amp, right? And they were like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. So I ended up with this, where I am now, I've got this kind of hybrid thing going, and it's working pretty well, man, because it's still in ears, right?
Yeah.
But we've now got sound on stage,
Nice.
right? So I'm using an amp. The bass player now is bringing an amp. The
Yep.
drummer is actually bringing his acoustic kit, because when I first was rehearsing with these guys, he was playing an electronic kit.
Right.
Not because he wanted to, right? Because that was just the setup for how they were rehearsing. And it's the flexibility of having, I'm using the Quad Cortex just for effects.
Right.
So like you might set your FM3 up with this head, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm using it in four cable, basically. So I've got stuff before and in the loop.
In the loop. Yeah.
And I have, a handful of scenes, one preset
Yep.
on the Quad Cortex, just one preset.
Yep.
And I can go,
Toggle.
I can toggle between,
Yeah.
6 different scenes that bring up those clean, those 2 different clean tones, the rhythm tone and the lead tone, and a few other scenes with a few other, like maybe the phaser comes in or whatever. It's all just fucking phaser and flanger, and I just set it up like an ed pedal board, basically.
That's all we need to do.
It's all you need. And but once I've got the MIDI going, right, the connectivity between the floor unit
Yeah.
and the presets on here, it's so easy. And I'm feeding front of house and my in-ears, and obviously the other guys in the band, back through I'm taking a line out off the speaker, because I've got my speaker cabinet. I've got a speaker cabinet on stage, so I've got volume and I can feel it, and that's changed my playing experience massively, right? Because all of a sudden you've got that cabinet.
Yep.
But I am taking a line out off the speaker cable.
Yep. And then you're feeding a load box.
No load box, because the cab's
No,
live.
the cab is your load box. Yeah.
But I'm running it back into the Quad Cortex on a separate return
There you go.
with an IR that's then going to house.
Yep.
And again, that was an idea I got off a Pete Thorne video.
That guy can make dog shit sound like $1 million.
You know who
What he
else
showed?
can? You know who else can? This guy.
Oh, look at this.
Hey!
Oh, what's up, Hoss?
Hey, man.
Hey everyone, how we doing?
How you
Good.
doing, man?
Yes, I'm doing very well, thank you. Very well indeed. I've been trying to get a few things done in the studio, but enjoying listening to this chat in the background. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
I've got basically fuck all done. So, yeah.
I brought
Nah,
Randy.
excellent. Yeah.
How's things, brother?
Very good. Keeping busy. There's bits of studio work, some touring, and some other bits and pieces as well. So yeah. It's as always, you got to keep your fingers in a few different pies in music these days. So it's good. It's been good. Really, really busy.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Ryan says,
indeed.
Hoss.
Hey Ryan, how you doing, brother? Yeah, it's been fascinating listening into you guys actually, because I just wanted to say, as you guys probably know, I've experienced working with the Alta a little bit when Jason and I have done some of the promo videos for his YouTube channel, and I think one of the things that I'd like to say, I mean, you've all heard the tones already just during this chat, and it sounds, every channel and mode that you can put it in just sounds absolutely incredible, and they've all got their own voice. I think one of the things I'd like to say is that with the MIDI capability, it's so versatile. But the MIDI thing, if people are not that used to it, or they're not used to running ahead with MIDI, shouldn't let that put them off, because as Jason was demonstrating before, it's super, super simple. And the fact that you can just set the amp how you want it with your bright switches, your vintage modern mode, and all of that. Once you've got the sound where you want, you just press the store button and hit your MIDI switch, and it saves it. And it's as simple as that. So he's really designed it so that it couldn't be easier to store all your different sounds. And I saw some numbers in the chat before saying, yeah, with some different cabs, you'd have 1.3 million different sounds. And I think that like even just running through the same cab, it seems to me that if you do some simple math, I mean, Jason, can you refresh my memory that some of the power amp features with the settings are storable as well, or no? Am I misunderstanding that?
No, the only stuff that is storable is what's on this control panel here, which is kind of like channels and settings or channels and modes. It doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't store like how you dial in the pots, where those are stored. It's not.
Of course, yeah, not the pots, but were there buttons to do with the presence and depth as well, or the negative feedback? I can't remember.
No, the only okay. There are a couple of things that we haven't spoken about. The effects loop.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Whether the effects loop is active or bypassed is storable.
Yeah.
In terms of a preset, and I'm not using that in my current live rig, but I have absolutely used that where I've had a delay pedal back at the amp actually, where you like just a couple of short cables. Like I've just literally got the delay pedal set on top of the head, and I go from a rhythm sound to a lead sound, and the loop will come in, and I've got my delay there, so you can install that. Overall system master volume. So each channel on this amplifier has a volume, as you'd expect, so you can get channel 1, 2, and 3 relative volumes how you want them. Then there's an overall system master volume for the whole amp.
Yeah.
And that's
sorry, I was just going to say, which is why when you were saying before about how with your channel 3, you've also given it a volume boost. That's how, because each channel has its own independent volume. Then you've got an overall master volume.
That's right. And in my setup, how I'm using the amp live at the moment, I'm just using channel 3 only for leads. So I'm using just the volume on for that channel to get that volume boost, which you need. Yep. We don't have a front of house guy who's going to push my fader up. I have to do it myself. But there is a second master volume. It's got 2 masters. And you can activate the second master volume with a setting on here.
Yep.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So people go, well, why do you have 2 master volumes? 2 reasons. Again, everything that's in this amp is things that I wanted for a live amp.
Yep.
When you activate clipping with diode clipping or a SAT circuit, anyone who's got a Friedman will know this. Mm-hmm. This is the way they work. When you put diode clipping into a signal, it compresses the signal. You get a volume drop. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. More gain, but a volume drop. Yeah.
Quite noticeable volume drop. And the second master volume is there so that if you're just rocking on channel 2 and you flick it into clipping mode, you can activate the second master volume so that you can then normalize the volumes. Yeah, so you don't get a volume drop. Yeah. Which, again, is a thing that I've found useful. Or, depending on your use case, you can use the second master volume as a volume boost across all channels. So if you need to play a lead break with a clean sound, you got it, right? Hit second master and you'll get your volume. You dial it in as you want, right? But you get your volume boost that way.
Yeah, gotcha. And that's part of that second master is part of the MIDI programmability.
Yeah. So you can store that. Yeah, and so again, that's something I'm definitely using that, right? In the current setup that I'm playing with. there's some songs I need to play with, kind of more mid gain or low gain lead work. So channel 3 is great to fucking rip a a nice searing lead solo. But if you need to play, I don't know, think of a good example, but something that's lower gain, Strat style tone or whatever, right? Yeah. I think Simon, like, I don't know, some Cold Chisel or something like that, right? For us Aussies.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want a big freaking heavy metal lead tone. It's got to be, more of a clean or crunchy kind of thing. So that second master is awesome for that, right? Because I can just activate that and get my volume boost from the amplifier that way. Yeah,
that's awesome. So at a glance, even just quickly, I mean, it seems to me that with even just like, a cheap MIDI foot switch, which are about $100 or something, you've basically got 24 different sounds in the one head. And I don't know any amp that can do all that, but also with the incredible tone that it has. So, because if you've got 3 channels and each of them has a 2 different bright options, right?
Yeah.
We're doing
so that gives you
vintage modern.
So you've got 6. So with the 2 different bright options on each of the 3 channels, you've got 6 different sounds. Then adding in the option for either vintage mode or modern mode, that doubles it. So that gives you 12 sounds. And then being able to program in the different master volumes gives you 24. So, I mean, you guys would know. I mean, I've been a session guitarist my whole life since I left high school, and I've played lots of different amps and, MIDI preamps and different things and modelers and stuff like that. To me, if you want the versatility of what a modeler gives you in terms of being able to just flip to, change patches to different volumes, different gain structures, different modes of vintage sounds and modern sounds, if you want all of that, but you actually want it to be a valve amp with transformers and stuff, it's the perfect solution. Absolutely
that
perfect
sounds
solution.
Good. That sounds good across the platform. Dead clean to full on.
I agree.
There's no.
I agree.
And
thank you, John. Well, I mean, you guys were mentioning Jason's 12 tones 1 amp video on YouTube before, and if anyone hasn't heard that and they think, there's no way one head can have that many different tones, go to the Headfirst YouTube channel and just and check out 12 tones 1 amp, and you will hear. I mean, that's only 12 tones because we weren't taking things like volume differences into consideration. But I mean, you'd have to agree. We run I know John, you and Randy have seen it. It runs the gamut from crystal cleans, like Alan Holdsworth style cleans, all the way to Meshuggah and everything in between. So so I definitely recommend anyone check that out if they haven't seen it and they think, there's no way it can do all that, but it really, really can.
It can.
That Michael Landau thing you did, Simon. Jesus.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you.
That was the fur came up on that one, brother.
Well, that's interesting because, Jason, if I recall correctly, that was something that just happened spontaneously. I'm pretty sure we had some idea of the different tones we wanted to try and check out. But you got to keep in mind, too, that we shot that video and I hadn't played through that amp before. So that video was shot when Jason brought the Alta over, and we just said, all right, let's spitball and just take it through its paces, And for a guitarist like me, who's used to working with different artists and playing different styles of music, that was awesome fun. But I was like, what about this? And Jason would go, all right, and he would dial in change the settings, and we would use that as a starting point. And then one of us would say, oh, what about this? And then we would change the settings and try that and swap guitars, and it was so much fun.
It certainly helps with when you've got the guitar in your hands, man.
Please.
The thing that I remember about the Mike Landau piece was that you had it on your list. So we've been working on a list of kind of things that that
Yeah,
could
like
be
a
playing.
brainstorming list of different things. Yeah.
And that was on the list. But what happened in the moment was actually that you played that. I think you played that on your 5150 guitar, didn't you?
He did.
In the
right
think I
after
did.
the
Yeah.
after the George Lynch.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
the way that happened, John, is we had the 5150 guitar there because I reckon we'd been working on Mean Street, and because the order that we recorded them weren't necessarily the order that they ended up in the video, of course. And
Yeah.
I reckon you'd ripped out the Mean Street stuff, and you still had the guitar in your hands plugged in, and you just went, "Oh, what does it sound like when I clean it up? When I roll the volume back?" And then that tone happened, and you were like, "Oh fuck!" And you just started playing that.
Yeah, that's right.
You're just like, "This is the tone for the Landau thing," and you started playing
The
it.
Landau
and then,
thing, yeah.
And then you went, "Oh, but we should demo how, what tone we're getting with the volume right on 10, and then roll it back."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." So I said, "So what are you going to play?" And you were like, "Oh, I don't know, man. What about some George Lynch?" And I'm like, "Okay, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to play any of that shit. You play it." So that intro, I remember this vividly, man, because I was as clear as a bell.
Yeah.
You learnt it on the spot. You went, "Oh, let's just put the tape on," and you played that intro from that track, and you learned how to play it, like in 30 seconds, and then we rolled the camera, and you played the intro, the George Lynch thing, and then you rolled the volume back, and then you played the Landau. So how it was put together with that guitar and the tone was very real time.
It was pretty spontaneous, and I mean that's always the fun things about having those recording days like that and messing around with equipment. It's the stuff that happens spontaneously that gives you the John, you were saying your fur was standing up, but that's what happens for us too when we're recording, and stuff just pops into your brain, and you try it, and it works great. And so that's how that came about, because
it's such a fantastic example of what that amp can do with just turning the volume down, right? I mean, so many people need a fucking preset for this tone and that tone. Just turn the volume down, and it does it.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, so I was just going to say, one of the things that this wasn't in the amp when I first was still in the kind of R&D phase, but it became an obvious thing to add into the production version, was that if you just want to have the amp on basically one setting, just turn it on and use it.
Yep.
Because I did find when I was through the R&D phase, I'd come in here and work on tones and shit like that, and I'd turn the amp on, and I'd have to, because I didn't have it connected up with the MIDI switch, I'd press my settings in,
right.
And then I realized, like, oh fuck, what I should do is just get it to recall your last setting.
Yeah.
So that when you power the amp on, it'll just automatically come up in whatever your last setting was. So if you're
last thing you played,
so if you're rocking channel 3 in modern mode, and that's where you want to sit as your like kind of like single channel amp mentality, just like plug in and go. That's what it does. Yeah.
I have a question.
Go for it.
What's your BOAS? So I see there's a pre-order section on the site right now. How long does it take once pre-order? What's your lead times?
Good question. It's all over the map, to be honest, depending on where things are at this moment in time. John, I'm doing a run of these in December, so we're kind of, we're 4 to 6 weeks. Starting kind of late November. On average, I've been about 3 to 4 weeks. Sort of like across the whole journey. This amp's been out for 2 years now, and from deposit to delivery, about 3 to 4 weeks.
That's insane.
That's
cool.
That's fantastic for
how
the
4
operation
months
works.
for my SL.
Yeah.
How long, John?
4 months.
4 months. Okay.
4
Like,
months. Wow.
That doesn't make me
I'm
feel
in
bad.
Canada too, though, right?
That can I ask? Did you have to? I was kind of curious now. Did you? Was
Yeah.
that deposit or did you pay up? They wanted the full money up front.
Oh no, not. I ordered through a dealer and I gave
Okay.
him $500.
Yeah, sweet.
To place the order.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but no, I totally like the deposit because there is pre-order, right? You get enough pre-orders for a run, and then you come and do a batch basically.
It's a little bit like that. Yeah, so I kind of like I've kept the amp pretty much continuously available for sale. You know, like I've never kind of taken it. I mean, at the moment, if you go to the website, the Alta show's out of stock, and I had
That's
to
me.
do that.
I did that.
Yeah, you did. I had to do that because I don't want to. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I should, but I don't want to be the guy that's delivering amps 6 months. You know.
Yeah.
Like I don't want that reputation. Like, oh yeah, you know, fucking waiting list 6 months, blah blah blah. You know, am I ever going to get my amp? I just kind of don't. You know, I want to kind of be able to deliver inside, 4 to 6 week window. And 3799 US for that 100 watt, 3299 for the 50 watt Evil Joe. So yeah, like I actually took it off. So with the kind of the website on the online store, it just trying to manage the supply chain and my own kind of build, window. They'll either be available by now, and I'll ship it within a couple of weeks, or it'll be pre-order for amps shipping in a month or two. Or it's just not available today because I'm still catching up.
And I mean, you've got the top quality parts, Hayward transformers, the great tubes that you use. Yeah.
So this is, and I think right at the beginning of this chat, I talked about some of the joys of, running a business like this from Australia where, I've got Australian customers and that's awesome, right? And I have... very grateful for the support I've had locally, and which is kind of growing nicely actually, because there's this thing about Australians, it's kind of part of our culture, right? Which is you kind of need to make it overseas before Australians pay attention to you.
Yeah, it's true.
100%. A lot of Australian artists will tell you that story, and I'm not putting myself in their category at all. But there is this thing where, it's like you're just some local guy,
Yeah.
But when you start to get attention in a market like the US or North America, it then kind of starts to flow back again, and it's like, oh yeah, so maybe the stuff is okay. I should check it out. So I have had nice support locally, which is cool because from a delivery perspective, that's obviously the easiest because I'm delivering amps locally, and this is where working with my buddy Shea has been so important because for the North American market, so US and Canada, I'll have a system set up now with him where he does the final delivery, the final distribution for us, but I'm still building the amps here. So we basically, these head shells are made at the KSR factory in Ohio. That's Kyle Rhodes and his team. And Kyle...
Great guy.
Awesome dude. Just love him, right? Again, one of these guys that you meet in this industry who's become a friend. And, I've got on an airplane and gone up there and spent time with him a couple of times now. He's great fun to go out with as well, which is kind of dangerous. He's younger than me too. It's not fair. So you gotta manage your health a little bit when you go out on the beer with Kyle. But
I think I heard Kyle say one time that if you ever want to go eat, if you go to LA and you want to eat good, take Dave Friedman with you and you pay. He'll take you to the best steakhouse in the city, and you're going to get loaded while you're there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I've done that with Dave. been out for dinner with Dave a couple of times now, with his wife as well. So yeah, Dave's just been awesome like that. But Kyle's actually built. Man, it's amazing what he's achieved already at KSR. And one of the really clever things that he did was to open his factory up as an OEM manufacturer for other companies. So there's a lot of brands getting stuff built at the KSR factory that people just aren't aware that it's happening there.
Right.
Right. And mainly because the brands don't necessarily want people to know that they've outsourced manufacturing.
Yeah, they're not building stuff in-house.
And it might not be all of it. It's like me, right? Like I'm just getting... Kyle's fulfilling part of my supply chain, but he's not building amplifiers for me. You know what I mean? Like he's doing head shells and chassis and soon to be 4x12 cabinets, which will ship directly, for the North American market, right?
Or you're not going to send them to Australia, load them up with the cabs, and then send them back?
Correct, man. See, I'm an expert on logistics now. It took me 2 years to figure that one out. Yeah, but I have started. So with the stuff, right? The way it's kind of working is that, and this is again where Kyle has just been so freaking helpful for me. Our transformers are all made by Haber, as you mentioned, John. Actually, in anticipation of this question, I've got one right here.
Look at that.
So this is our. I don't know if that's going to focus on it. Probably not.
Oh, tilt it down just a little. There you go.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Headfirst OT. Yeah.
This is our custom wound 100-watt OT that's in the Alta. And these are all done in Michigan. And they are freighted down. The way that we're working now is that they're freighted down to KSR in Ohio. And Kyle, Shea, and I are all kind of sharing freight there because we're all getting transformers made for our respective companies, Headfirst, Monomyth, and KSR at Haber. And so we kind of align ourselves around orders. I mean, we're constantly kind of ordering and keeping supply chain going. So it's not too difficult to work it out where we can actually, share freight on a pallet and it comes down to Ohio. And then my stuff gets split where a bunch of the stuff that I need, transformers, chassis, and head shells, particularly for the Australian market, I'm loading on a pallet and sea freighting out here now. So a pallet into a shipping container, onto a boat, across the Pacific Ocean. Yeah.
Right.
Because you can air freight, and I still air freight stuff via FedEx, and it's super fast. It's incredibly quick. I can freight stuff to and from North America quicker than I can send things around Australia. It's incredible.
Right.
I've got nothing but good things to say about FedEx. I tell you, they're freaking amazing. I haven't had a bad experience, and I'm shipping stuff all the time.
Yeah, same with me, but I don't do that.
You got to pack
FedEx
stuff
has always
right.
been great. Yeah. Always been
I
great.
see all the stuff in the forums about stuff getting damaged in shipping, and yeah, it can happen. But man, I would guess that more often than not, things just aren't packed properly.
Yeah.
So with that, for the US market, where I still build the amplifiers here, but then I will ship because I don't bring head shells out here. So, like your amp, John, the head shell that the amp will go into is sitting in storage in Bloomington, Indiana, as we speak.
So it's halfway there, or partway.
That's
there.
right. So you don't see it's on the way.
It's already there.
Yeah.
Right. So then I will build. So with the transformers and the chassis that I need to build amps with, they're here. I will build a working amplifier here.
Yep.
Test it and run it at 120.
Yep.
Wall voltage. Pull all the tubes out, and then box and ship that, just the chassis. It's a working amp, right? But it's smaller because there's no head shell and no tubes, so it's not fragile, all that kind of stuff, right? And I've got like custom made boxes that are sized perfectly just for that that thing so I can air freight those at quite a cost-effective rate. That's kind of, you know, part of my just cost of doing business. You know, I've just got to deal with that thing. You know, and then Shea will receive those, and then he will tube bias final checks and tests at US wall voltage, mount them in the head shell box,
Get them out the door,
and ship and get them out the door and that kind of stuff, right? So, and I've said this many times that, you know, without his help and friendship, there'd be no Headfirst. Just
in the
couldn't
US
happen.
market.
Yeah, and without the US market, I couldn't do this full time. There's just Australia's not big enough, you know.
And the response has been great. I take it.
Yeah, like I mean, it's interesting that the whole YouTube. So I started a YouTube channel. I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe something like that, and I started it based on. I didn't really want to go on YouTube, to be honest with you. You know, like it's not for everyone.
Right.
You know, particularly playing guitar on YouTube, it's not for everyone. But even back then I knew it would be a very important part of creating a profile.
Yeah.
And I knew back then that the only way that this would turn into something more than a hobby would be as an export business.
Mm-hmm.
If I just focused on Australia and made it like I'm just doing Aussie stuff, right? You know, word of mouth, the long road, it'd just be a hobby. I'd still be in, you know, my office job or what, you know, whatever. There's just no way. The Aussie market's super important, and as I said before, you know, I'm really grateful for the support that I continue to have. But you got to have the US thing. You know, and then maybe the EU one day, I don't know, whatever, right? Like the EU's a whole another ball game. But so Shea, I mean, Shea's help's been a hugely important part of that. But the YouTube channel was started, and I started sharing a lot of the videos on my channel, and continue to be, are based around understanding how tube amps work, mods you can do, simple maintenance things, kind of like, you know, and that was, again, the deliberate thing of like build an audience of people that are interested in this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got a market.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can then market to, you know, it's like
100%.
Yeah.
And it makes total sense. And I mean, it's the same with, I had a PE100 Deluxe, and fantastic amp, but I mean, I never would have even considered it if I didn't know Dave as a YouTube personality, and how approachable and accessible he is. And he helped me build the whole wet, dry, wet. Just nothing in it for him, you know.
So
He's just
true.
such an approachable guy.
So true.
You know, fantastic amp is just not the right circuit for me. But him, Metropolis, George, all these guys, Stevie Fryette, I mean, they're you almost feel like you know them after building this community, right? And you know what? You don't want to be giving your money to a douche, to be honest with you. You know?
They all are, right? I haven't had the pleasure of meeting George or Stevie Fry yet. I'd love to one day. I'm hoping that my next trip to LA, I'll actually get to meet Steve, because I've got two connections to him now. Obviously, Dave is one of them, and the other one is Joe Barisi, who
Segway,
the evil Joe. And so Joe's actually been on Steve's channel. So
yeah, that's right.
Maybe 6 months ago or so, Steve helped him with a rebuild of his high watt head that he's got.
I watched that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Joe, I mean, Joe's got the biggest collection of amps I've ever seen in one room. It's like so much stuff. It's insane.
So with that amp, I mean, we've opened it up. Let's give a quick little
Oh yeah. So if you look actually at that Fryette video, if you look in the because I noticed it straight away. If you look in the background of it when Steve is at Joe's studio in the live room, the original Evil Joe amp that I built for Joe is actually kind of just lurking in the background there. So that came out of Joe is the kind of producer, engineer, mixer that he wants to create unique sounds. I remember asking him when I first got to meet him, and hung out at his studio for a couple of days back in 2023, and I asked him about modeling and digital, and because there's not a single digital device in his studio.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he's got digital effects units, like digital reverb or.
To me, that's the only place where that shines. Like the effects section in an Axe Effects, you can't beat that.
It's amazing.
Eventide stuff,
Yeah.
all that's great.
But there's no Kemper there. There's no Quad Cortex. There's no Axe Effects. There's none of that. There's no guitar modeling gear in that whole studio. And he's got more gear and more rack gear than you've ever seen in one room. It's just like it's a lifetime of collecting stuff, right? And he's like, why would I have that? And I'm like, I don't know, convenience. It's like, nah. It's like, I want to create my own sounds. Like, why would I use patch number 37 that anyone else can get?
Yeah.
Like, that's not how I roll, right? People come to me because they want the sound that I can deliver.
Right.
And he waved his arm around at all the stuff that's in his room, and he said, "This is all part of it." Like I know how all these things work, every single one of them. And he's got old tube compressors and all kinds of shit in there. And about I don't know, 60 heads or something out in the live room. It's like something like that. He's got so many.
He could probably sell 30 of them if he got an Alta.
he's got so many heads that he has to store them end on end, like that.
Okay. Yeah.
He has to rack them
Upright.
that way rather than like this.
Yeah.
They're like turned on their end,
Yeah,
You can see it
not
on the
landscape.
Yeah, yes. You can see it in that Fryette video. You can see
I'll go back and look.
Camera goes down the room and you can see all the heads in the background on the shelf. And then on the side of the live room, which is the long wall, it's just lined with cabinets and heads set up like this, more traditionally, but just stacked and stacked and stacked. But he goes like, well, I don't want to use a modeler, I'll crap my. So it's a kind of glimpse into how his mind works, because he actually wants to know enough about how these devices work so he can extract the sounds that he wants out of them. And that led him into building his own 100-watt plexi. He built a kit. He built it from a Mojotone kit, a 1959 Super Lead. And late in 2022, it must have been, December 22, I get this direct message on Instagram from this guy asking all about Jose mods.
Right.
And, I told the story the other day when I was on Brett Kingman's channel when we did a feature on the Evil Joe. But, I get questions like that all the time, actually. So I was like, okay, another guy wants free advice, whatever.
Yeah.
And I looked again at the name. I was like, oh, fuck Joe Barresi. Like, I knew who he was. Because,
He's worked with everybody.
Yeah, I listened to Tool and all this stuff, right? And I knew his credentials. And I was like, holy shit, it's Joe Barresi. So, of course, I helped him and I was, answered his questions. And he basically wanted to mod this plexi that he'd built and start, put an extra gain stage in it, maybe some diodes, and basically turn it into a modded Marshall kind of high gain thing. And that's part of his learning, understand, about gain staging and how these things, so you can extract, it's just how I could see that this is like, okay, so this is how he wants to know how everything works, right? So he can then maximize it. And after a couple of weeks of this to and fro, and he was trying things, I'd say, man, just try, put a 100k resistor across that pot, and then, maybe a cap to ground here and blah, blah, blah. And he'd do it, you know, solder the things in on his head, and you come back the next day, oh man, it sounds fucking awesome. I was like, right on, dude, right on. Fucking awesome, right? It's addictive. And then he goes, oh, you should just build me an amp. So we started on that. And of course he wanted a modded Marshall, and he knew that that's kind of where my, you know, DNA was. And so we did a one-off 50 watt amp. And during that design period, I was sending him not sound clips by then, because we hadn't built the amp, right? I was sending him kind of mock-ups of the design, like, you know, what the front panel would look like,
right?
You know, what controls would be on it, how the switching would work, and so on. And he's like, "Can we call it the Evil Joe?" I was like, "Hell yeah, of course you can. Like, this is your amp. You call it whatever you want, right?" And that's his nickname, right? I won't tell you the story about how we got that nickname. It's a long story.
Right.
I think I told the story when I originally featured. I did a video on that original Evil Joe amp. Anyway, it's around on the internet. You can find he himself. Sure. Yeah, he himself tells a story about how he got that name. But he's like, it's become a nickname, and he carries it forward. You know, like he's even been credited on albums as, you know, produced by Evil Joe Barresi. And so we did this amp, and I shipped it to him in early 23, and it arrived at his studio in Pasadena before my first trip to LA with Headfirst, and that's when I first met Dave in person and all that shit, right? And then I was, you know, I went to Indiana and met Shea for the first time, and then met Kyle at KSR and so on.
Right.
On my way back to Australia, I stopped back in at LA and then had a couple of days with Joe in his studio. The amp was there because it had already been shipped there. And we worked on it together over a couple of days, just with some fine tuning. He kind of wanted a few things to work a bit differently with the switching, and just kind of fine tune the tones a little bit.
Right.
But it was cool. That was one of those, again, one of those great experiences where I'm sitting there in a studio, hunched over the amp, soldering iron, all his on his workbench, you know, all his stuff. Yeah. And he's sitting there kind of like, oh, what are you doing now? You know, what's that? And da-da-da. And then we'd take it into the live room, crank it loud, because you can play as loud as you want there, you know. And then he'd go, oh, what about, you know, maybe just change this or change that. And they would bring the amp back into where his console is and make the changes or whatever. That, you know, then we kind of finished that up, boxed it up, well, not boxed it up, you know, put it back in its head shell, back in his amp rack. And I guess 3 or 4 months later, or something like that, I was thinking about, you know, the Alta was out. Yeah. Starting to get a little bit of traction with that. What's my next amp going to be? Well, I want to do a 50 watt because I had 100. And I was going to kind of start to fill out the product line, you know. And I was like, oh man, that's obvious. That's what I should do. I should create a production version of that amp. And so then I set about the task of doing that. And the very first thing I did was ask Joe's permission, of course. Yeah. And see what he thought about the idea of doing an amp that he would, you know, he's associated with, right? Or endorsed, or I mean, I called it a signature amp, but he said, no, you can't. Wait, not that he didn't want to be associated with it, but he said, it's your amp, man. He goes, I just put my name on it. He goes, but, you know, if you want to call it a signature amp, go for it. So that's how it all started. And we also had to get the permission, or we wanted to get the permission of the guy where his nickname came from. It's actually, I won't tell the whole story because I said it's a long story, but the nickname came from a guy who does comedy records. Okay. Prank calls. Right? And over a period of time, he recorded himself making all these. They are legit prank calls. Are hilarious. I've listened to a bunch of his stuff now. His brother, the guy that did the prank calls, brother is a bass player who played in Racer X with Paul Gilbert. Okay. And there's a musical connection that ended up getting back to Joe. And one of his calls is about this guy called Evil Joe. That's how the name came about. So I went and asked his name's Mike, the guy that created the Evil Joe character, and I, and trying to introduce myself and said I've been working with Joe on this amp, and he obviously knows Joe is and knows that Joe has kind of picked up this nickname for this character that he created. And I said to him, man, Joe and I have been talking about bringing this out as a production amp, and we're seeking your blessing to use the name. And if you're cool with that, we'd love the very first one, serial number 1, to be yours.
Nice.
Like, we will send you an amp. Which we did, right? So the very first one of these, which was built when, other than my prototype, obviously, where I had to kind of get the thing working properly, was built when I was in the US in May earlier this year, and we shipped it straight to Mike, who's in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was the first new amp that he'd had in 20 years, and he absolutely loves it.
That's great.
Yeah, it's cool. It was really nice to do that, for him. So Joe basically paid for the cost of the parts, and I did all obviously the build and the labor and all the rest of it, and we got the thing out to him. So that's the story behind the amp. This amp is the circuit, for all intents and purposes, is the same as that original amp that I did with Joe. And all I did was for the production version was to basically re-engineer it to make it easier to build, because that first amp was kind of custom, and it had like custom stuff done to it. And so I wanted to make it kind of engineer it so it was more of a production thing that you could kind of build many of, and simplified the way that the kind of channels work a little bit, because in that first amp, it's more of a producer's amp, should I say, right? Where he can kind of like get some pretty interesting sounds out of it. But I found that's
something you want other people associating with Jason Tong.
I just found what I found was, because I did do a couple of one-offs of that kind of configuration that Joe ended up with, and I found that for the average guitar player, it was a bit too complex to use. For Joe, it's perfect, right? Because he knows how to dial shit in and get all these different sounds. So this amp, same circuit, but just a bit more straightforward to use. A taste of the sound. Oh, is it? Oh, yeah, it can be. If you were to give me 2 seconds.
Let's do it.
I think we should think about, we can go all night. And I know you said we were good for a while, but we're pushing 3 now. And
we've got, what is it, 240, I'm showing 244. So if we go another 10 or 15, it's okay.
Fantastic.
We'll get this going. Just give me 2 seconds.
Like Pete was saying, that thing looks badass. I bet it sounds badass too, Pete.
Yeah. Did I tell you, Simon, I changed my Tolex from black to red after seeing that on his site? That was it. I had to change it.
You're muted, Hoss.
Sorry, guys. Apologies. I was just saying that I've had the Evil Joe in my studio as well, and it definitely is badass. No doubt about it. And it's got a different thing to the Alta. Its tone is different. It's not the same. It's not just different knobs and stuff. It's really. I was very surprised by how unique its character was. It's a great amp.
Well, I guess it would be based off a plexi circuit with the mods, right?
Jason would be better to answer that.
Joe's input.
Yeah, that's right. But whatever they've done, whatever witchcraft has gone into changing, capacitors and different things, it's. I think my words. Oh, you'll hear it.
Fuck me.
Jesus.
You guys hear what I mean, right? It's got a totally different character.
Oh yeah.
So cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, its character is pissed and off.
Yes, that's right. That should be the names of the two channels. One, pissed. The second one, off.
Well, the two channels are evil and darkness. Actually.
There you go. Yeah,
So
yeah.
Nice.
I'm on the darkness channel. Yeah, this is definitely more. I mean, it can do clean tones. It's got like you can set up channel 1 to be either a clean or a kind of crunch. Or I just went straight over to channel 2 here in the high gain mode. And
That's
course.
fucking
Straight
awesome,
to
Jason.
it's my old school thrash metal riffs.
If you're
Oh, yeah,
asleep,
baby.
you're fucking awake now.
Wow.
That's straight
That
in.
is killer.
You can
That
get. It's
is
interesting.
Through
Like
and I
the,
are Lars,
Sorry,
yeah.
it's
That's an
It's-
IR.
yeah, it's definitely an IR. It's an IR. So this is going into serial reactive load, IR, and then into the stream, and that's a greenback IR. So this amp's quite well suited to V30s as well, as you can imagine, right? Like it's a bit more modern. Like gain wise, they're very similar. Like the level of gain that the Alta can get to on channel 3 with the clipping, and where this is at. I mean, you know, Jim from Slipknot is using this head, right?
Yeah.
Straight in, no pedals, nothing, just straight in. So there's
Yeah.
no shortage of gain there. But this is like I remember Simon. Simon's asked when I took the amp around and we did that release video,
Yeah.
and Simon used like, you know, well, describe the. I'm not going to tell you what the differences are. I want you to tell me. So you plugged in and started
which is
playing
a great way to do it. So if I can expand on that a little bit for everyone, I hadn't heard any sounds of the amp either in person or on Jason's YouTube channel or anything. He just brought it round, and we made a decision that he was not going to try and describe it to me, and he was not going to also like immediately start dialing in the settings of the amp, where he was like, I just want you as a guitarist to plug into it and see what happens. Like how do you respond to it? You know, like what is your instinct with how you would set it? And I don't think that all of this made the cutting room floor, probably, Jason, but the video we took where I was first experiencing this amp, and we had it on top of my greenback 4x12, sitting right in front of it in my studio.
Yeah.
And I was just grinning from ear to ear. I was just like, what the fuck? This is awesome, you know?
We did, I mean, we had, I don't know, maybe an hour's worth of footage, which I trimmed down to 90 seconds or something.
90 seconds, yeah.
For the video. So I do actually, I still haven't done a video on this amp. I did plenty on the Alta, as you know, John, because you've looked at them. So, I mean, that will come. I know I kind of need to do like a, you know, this is Jason's video on the amp, you know, because I've obviously did the one with Simon. It's on my channel. There's a very short clip of Shea playing the amp when I was in Indiana that I posted, and I've done that. I was on Brett Kingman's channel a week or two ago.
I love him, man. He's so good.
Oh yeah.
That was cool. That was kind of more of an interview style rather than an amp review thing, but that's kind of, you know, Brett, you just go around there and hang out for a bit, and then he just like rolls the camera and he goes, right, let's go. And you'll notice that, you know, 25 or so minute video, it's just all one take. It's just like one.
Yeah.
He just rolls the camera, right, and off you go.
Well, Jason, anytime you want to bring the Evil Joe back around to do a long form demo of it, just say the word.
Oh man, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
And those are available on in the U.S. market as well, and for pre-order now. Yes.
Yeah, 100%. So we're now doing. I'm kind of preparing and building for the second run. So the first run of these came out and was released in May of earlier this year. That was the whole thing, where the first one went to that guy Mike, and the second one, actually the second and the third went to Joe. So he got serial number 2 and 3 because he wanted one for him, and serial number 3 he purchased for his engineering assistant that works for him.
Nice.
Joe's amazing. He's just like, I want to buy 2, and I'm like, yeah, but you only need 1. He goes, no, the second one's going to be for my assistant. I was like, oh wow, that's amazing.
That's cool.
And then the rest of them went out, got sold and were shipped from the US. And I built a bunch of them for Aussies actually. So over the last couple of months, I've just kind of been building these and sending them out locally. Maybe a couple have gone to the US as well. And now we're open for pre-order for the kind of second major run, which I'm doing in Indiana with Shea in
That sounds fantastic.
the first 2 weeks of December. And as I said here today, there's, I think, three slots left before
For
I
the American market.
Yeah, and that pre-order. So, and those are for amps that'll ship, week 1 or week 2 in December this year.
Right.
No, sorry, Ryan. I do want to go to NAMM one day. It's something I've never done.
I've not been either, actually.
Yeah, I'm going to be in the US in December. I'm not going to, getting back for January is not really going to happen. Yeah, so I've got that. Let me turn this up a bit.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Can you hear that circular delay?
That is
Sounds so good.
So good.
So good.
The other channel, so that's the darkness channel, right? Sorry, I got this bloody cable here. The evil. Way louder.
Your interface there.
It's a similar. Channel 1 is a similar voicing as 2 is the, obviously what I was just playing, high gain. But this one's more open, less compressed. Still plenty of gain there, right? But this is the guitar that you played, Simon, on the
It is. Yeah. Right.
and you played that. No MIDI in this head. It's just traditional.
Yeah. Straight
normal,
head.
straight
Normal
foot
channel
switch.
switching there.
More
Normal.
and more, or dark and evil.
Yeah, darkness.
Evil and darkness. Yeah.
So you can have like 2 channels of gain.
Yeah.
Like gain and then more gain. So it's like definitely, set us up for a kind of metal guy. Or
Channel
you
1
can,
is. So I was going to say, channel 1 is more. Channel 2 is more is more.
Yeah, that's right. You can actually. It's got a Plex mode for channel 1.
That's right.
Oh, cool.
So, which I just switched on, and now this channel. It's got a little bit of hair on it. You know, it's a kind of Marshall clean, I guess.
That's my jam
So if you have channel 1 set in this mode, it's kind of set and forget, right? There's no MIDI here. You can't, store them in presets. You just set it up and then you go with it's got a 2-button foot switch. You could have channel 1 as a clean and then channel 2 as your crunch. Also, I haven't even talked about this yet. It's got a boost. It's got an extra boost gain stage in the front end, and this is one of the. This was the feature from Joe's custom amp. That was one of the kind of last things that was added, was this ability to switch an extra gain stage in over the top, I guess. And the thinking behind that is to kind of have like people love boosting amps.
Yes.
Tube Screamer, whatever your poison is, all that shit, right? This kind of has, it's that concept but built into the amplifier and running at tube voltages, right? So high, not like 9 volts or 18, but like at 250
real voltage.
Yeah, so you can put it over the top of all of the modes. So this is we're in this kind of plexi clean kind of crunchy thing there. You can hear it come in, right? So put it over.
Now roll the volume back a little bit. Does it clean up in that mode?
Oh yeah, with that mode, yeah. It helps if I dial the right volume. I was dialing the volume with a neck pickup going, why isn't it doing anything? There you go.
Yeah. And those are about as hot a pickup as you can jam into a fucking guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That tickles the same part of the funny bone that breaking glass as a kid does.
Yeah, I agree. I think you guys can tell now that it's got such a different character to the Alta that when I first experienced it, I'm glad Jason didn't put some of the video of my first reaction to it, because I'm sure I looked like a goofy 8-year-old. I was like, what? What is that? That's awesome. It's just because I'd never, and I told Jason this like in the moment, I said, I don't actually think I've quite ever plugged into an amp that sounds like that in the flesh with the 4x12 right in front of me. And and it definitely made my hair stand up. And so the only question is you just need a head switcher and have both,
Right.
How many options is that then if you do your math? Cost?
Jason, all you need is, for anyone that wants it all, is slave in to your Alta heads so that you can have any other Headfirst in amp, preamp in, and have the whole thing MIDI switchable.
Yeah, that would be it. This is a 50-watt head, right? So the Alta is 100, and as John said earlier, it's got a 50-watt mode in it, which literally disables 2 of the EL34s, so you run it literally genuine 50-watt. This amp is a 50-watt. 2 EL34s, it's noticeably lighter. It's still, we all know, right? 50 watts is still loud as. But you can go like, we haven't done this, so this is the, I'll just do this real quick. This is the the Darkness channel, which is where we started, this little demo of the head, we didn't have the boost on.
Oh, yeah.
Oh no!
So we
Got to try that.
we were like that, right? Just with the...
Yeah, baby.
You don't know how
That's
specifically
crazy good.
that is tailored to what Randy would. That's awesome.
There you go, Randy.
If someone
Evil
needs
Joe
to
in my
put
future.
if someone needs to put a boost pedal in front of that, I think they've
They've lost their mind.
lost their
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that I'll tell you another little funny thing, right? So when I met Joe in his studio last year, he gave me a T-shirt, and I'd never seen. He gave me a T-shirt. I'd never seen the same before, but it had FTG on it. There's a photo of him on the internet actually wearing this T-shirt, standing next to Adam Jones from Tool, and FTG, and then under it, like the quote, is it Evil Joe? I was like, FTG? I said, what's that? And he went, fuck that guy. And so if you have a look on the website, you'll see it. That boost switch, the red LED, it's called FTG.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
That is
Now-
so cool.
Now I really need one because I say that all the time.
Fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy.
Fuck that
You
guy.
say it.
Yeah.
Oh my
Boys,
God.
it's been absolute fucking barn burner, man. That was such a fucking great show. I couldn't ask for. Wow, I've got tons more questions about but we've got another show to do once my Alta arrives.
Yeah, man.
Well,
Once
that's right.
once you get the amp, we'll do that. That'll be once
That's
you've
a
had it
great
for
idea.
if maybe a few weeks or whatever, and we can kind of go through what you've discovered so far, all that.
How awesome it is.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. We'll do a part 2, John.
Yeah, I think that's good. Otherwise, we'll be in Jakey Lee territory. Thoughts and prayers to that guy too.
Absolutely.
Right.
You know, that's
Man, that
awful news.
that was freaky to see those headlines that came up in my feed real quick this morning. I was like,
Yeah, same. Yeah, thoughts to Jake for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Apparently, going to make a full recovery, but nobody wants to hear about that shit. That's
No.
not needed.
Nope.
No.
I
I think we all love Jake too, so Jake's played some part on probably about all of us that hang around this community. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
Such an amazing player. He's a really cool dude, and
Yep.
man, I was literally watched because I didn't catch the Tone Talk live. Only little bits of it because I was away for the weekend, but I actually watched. Man, I watched that whole thing on replay yesterday while I was in the workshop.
right.
So that whole show and everything
Yeah.
that he talked about was so fresh in my mind, and so to see that news this morning was
Strange.
yeah, man, that was
Very strange.
yeah.
that was nuts.
I
Absolutely.
mean, I'm sure it would have nothing to do with that he was on Tone Talk a couple of days ago, right?
No,
I'm sure. Yeah.
no.
No,
But Friedman
at all.
did a press release, and they've talked with him, and everything's good. So
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
I was definitely pleased to hear that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for
Scott's
inviting me on.
thank you so much, Haas. It'd be great to eventually maybe we'll do another show and maybe have you guys on the jam and show us how to fucking play.
Oh, rubbish show you how to play. I catch you guys all the time when I'm running around doing bits and pieces, or if I'm in the studio, and it's always great. So, but yeah, look, I would be happy to jump in anytime. So we'll definitely talk about coordinating that. And yeah, once again, thanks for inviting me on at the end of this show. It was, Jason and I have talked a lot, as you guys would gather.
and a lot about his amps, and I've heard them in the flesh, and we've done the recordings and stuff. But actually, I learned a lot listening. I heard a couple of things, Jason, that during the show before I jumped in, that I was like, right, that's how it works. And so sometimes just because I'm not an amp builder or designer, some of the intricacies are lost on me, but the repetition of it, it really starts to click, and I think just absolutely fascinating to get the ground up perspective from the person that is making the sounds that you're hearing, but listening to their thought process all the way from every little component and, how they got into it. And I just find that endlessly fascinating. So yeah, great show, guys. Killer.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the invite, guys.
Here.
Yeah, it was
Always,
awesome, man.
Pleasure to be on. And when we come back for the second show, Hoss, maybe we can be at the same location, and
That's a great idea. Why don't I come to your place and we'll do it? The two of us will do it from your place. Is that a good idea?
Then you can play and I'll tweak rather than
Yeah. There's nothing wrong.
If we're in the same, Jason, if we're in the same room as Haas playing, you got to play too, brother.
Oh, dude, it's
You can see this if you check out the 12 tones of one amp video on Jason's channel. You can see in the outtakes at the end that it's very clear that there is plenty of stuff that Jason was nailing in one take that I was like, dude, that took me like 5 goes, and Jason steps up with the Gretsch or his detuned guitar and just plays it one time, and I'm like, well, I guess we got that.
Absolutely killer.
But yes,
thanks everybody for being here.
Thanks,
we'll sign off now, and guys, hang on for a second. We'll say goodbye in the green room.
Sure.
Yep. Awesome.
Thanks all. Catch it.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Eddie Van Halen here, telling you, keep playing, man. Gotta keep playing. It's the only thing there is. Music, man. Keep playing. All right? I'm gonna come looking for you if you don't.